Cool. Hi, my name is Christopher Sleeper, and I am the Faculty Honors Coordinator. I'd like to welcome you to our last day of the OMNI. This is the live day. This is my favorite one because we have students taking on this incredible challenge of doing something live. And so whether you're on television or doing a presentation, public speaking is a challenge. I just want to say thank you for doing what you do. We are here as the happiest and friendliest conference anywhere. And so we are your cheering section, but we're also here to learn from you. And so we understand that presenting live can be difficult, especially in this medium. And just know that we have all our love, support, gratitude, everything coming right at you. So if you can't feel it, just know that we're wishing you all the best today. Another thing that I want to mention is that we have a great opportunity coming up. It's the HTCC Irvine Conference. I've talked to some of you about that, and I really want you to consider sending in a proposal. We'll be sending out today a invitation to participate in that conference. It's going to be in later March 25th, 26th, 27th, but the deadline for that conference is going to be December 18th, next Friday. But before you get all nervous, the requirements for that conference are exactly one-to-one to our OMNI submissions that you did back in October or November. And so it shouldn't take much work. It just has to be done. And so take a look and see if that's something that you want to add onto your semester for your commitments, because it can really give you some unique opportunities. What's different about it is that there'll be 30 community colleges participating, and so you'll have a wide range of people participating in your Q&As. It also looks extremely good on your transcript, and so about 350 students will participate in it, and it gives you kind of an exclusivity across the state when you're doing your applications. Plus, you do end up getting notified of your acceptance in mid-January. So you can put that on your January update that you've been accepted at another conference as well, in addition to this one. So there's just a lot there that is awesome. And in fact, we could record that presentation, or you can do it live there, and all the experience. We've oftentimes found, Jika and I, that our students do so well at the next conference because they've had these opportunities to run through their presentation in these settings. And so our students always look fantastic. So all the work that you're doing right now can be used for that conference experience. So I just want to invite you to participate in that, but also let you know how proud of you we are. And so I believe in a student-led program. And so we have student leaders that help us run our events and plan our events. And we have two of those navigators here. We have Catherine Cavonis, and she's here, and she's wonderful. And the moderator today is also a navigator. Her name is Melina. Melina, why don't you take it away?
All right, sounds good. Thank you for filling us in about HTCC. I'm glad you all are here today this morning for our last day of OMNI. Before we go ahead and get started, I'm just going to go over a few things. We have a community expectation, so I'm going to share my screen with you. All right, great. Can we all see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I want you to know that this is a safe space meant for learning. We practice patience with yourself and others, speak from personal experience, and avoid speaking for others. Give everyone a chance to speak, never interrupt others. If you disagree with someone, ask questions to understand their intent or offer an alternate interpretation. Do not repress others' perspectives and treat everyone with respect, dignity, and kindness, as I know we will do today. And we have some great presentations lined up, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce the first one if we don't have any questions. Are we all set to go? All
Yes.
right. So the first presenter is Meg Sill, and her mentor was Zika Perovic. Her project is Introducing Fuzzy Logic and its Application. Instead of using classical logic to solve complex problems, we can benefit from the flexibility fuzzy logic has to offer. So Meg, if you are ready, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away.
All right, perfect. Let me just share my, okay. Hi, everyone. Kind of exactly what Melina said. I'm Meg Sill. I was supervised by Dr. Perovic as part of my honors contract for discrete mathematics. And today I'll be presenting fuzzy logic and its applications. So just a quick overview of everything that we'll be talking about today is I'll start with the purpose and motivation for my research, then give a little bit of background on what fuzzy logic actually has to offer. With that information, look at the aspects of a fuzzy system, and finally, just look at some of the applications. All right, let's get started. So the purpose for my research is that, well, currently, most of the research is into the development of logically correct and consistent operations within the formal representation itself. So the purpose of my research is to find the limits of classical logic, especially when it comes to building frameworks used in representing the real world. In other words, I just focus my research on finding the limits of classical logic and looking at fuzzy logic as a better alternative. And just to start off with the rationale for fuzzy logic is that it is aimed at a formalization of modes of reasoning which are approximate rather than exact. And I took this quote from the creator of fuzzy logic himself, Dr. Lotfizadeh. So he created logic in actually 1965 when he was a professor at the University of California, Berkeley. The reason he even came up with this idea was he was working on a computer program that could understand linguistic variables to process natural language. However, he realized that language is an imprecise tool, and as a result, the logic frameworks that he had been using or that were in place were inadequate. So quick refresher or an introduction just to Boolean logic, which is the more traditional or classical form. And it only offers two choices, and these choices are mutually exclusive, which means that you can either be fully true or fully false. And so I'll be demonstrating an example that shows where the limits of this logic lie. So suppose I ask anyone, are you honest? You have two choices, yes or no. And this didn't really make sense because yes would mean that you're always honest, never telling even a white lie, and no meaning that you're always lying. And with human nature, neither of these options really make sense. So to fill in some of these gaps, let me introduce fuzzy logic. So fuzzy logic is an approach to computing based on degrees of truth rather than the true or false that we just saw with Boolean logic, which a lot of modern computing is based on. So with fuzzy logic, we have truth values that range from any value, any real number value between 0 and 1. And we'll see that it's more of a spectrum as opposed to two distinct categories. So now, are you honest will be considered our fuzzy membership function. And here are some categories I just put. There are many more, but for the sake of the example, we also have mostly honest, mostly dishonest. And this is great because now, as you can tell, we have these membership values which can better represent someone's level of honesty. So now we hopefully can understand kind of the difference between traditional Boolean logic versus this non-classical, newer method of logic known as fuzzy logic. At least for me, I was really impressed by fuzzy logic's ability to quantify two really remarkable human capabilities. The first capability being our ability to reason and converse and make rational decisions in an uncertain or imprecise environment. And the second is our ability to perform mental and physical tasks without really using any measurements or computation. For example, if you're parking your car, you won't really be making any precise measurements. It's all just approximate. Now, more on that is how do we actually create this into a system built with fuzzy sets and fuzzy operators, which we will now be looking into. So I'm going to start with just crisp sets. And crisp sets are the sets that we learn in math classes and a really fundamental part of any math where an element is either a member of the set or is not a member of the set. There's no concept of you're kind of a member, not really a member. So just an example, we have set A, which contains modes of transportation. For example, a train, car, cycle, a bus. So now that we have crisp sets, let's look in to see what fuzzy sets are. So here, fuzzy sets are where elements can have degrees of membership. And it may not make sense, but hopefully this example will explain why that is necessary. So suppose you wanted to create a set of the most cost-effective methods of transportation. So let's see what we have here. And it might originally look like fractions, it's actually not. We'll see here that the upper number actually describes the degree to which the lower value is associated with the set. So the upper number is just it's called the membership degree value. So if we look here, we'll see a car on the scale of 0 being least cost effective, 1 being the most cost effective. It's closer to not as cost effective. And then we'll see a cycle, which is a lot more cost effective. So I added this image just because at least it helped me illustrate the differences between the classical set theory versus this fuzzy set theory. So here we have, again, the crisp set, where you're either an element or you're not an element. There is no such thing as kind of or not. And the graph looks a lot like a stepwise function in that you have 0 or you have 1, nothing in between. On the other hand, we have the fuzzy set, and the reason I really like this picture is because it incorporates kind of that shades of gray that is pervasive in basically any part of human life, where you have mostly in, kind of in, somewhat in, and then anything that's just not in wouldn't be part of it. And finally, you have the graph below, which offers a lot more precision than the previous one. So now with these sets, we actually are able to perform operations on them. And one point I wanted to note out is that the fuzzy operators are actually just an extension of the Boolean operators. So first we have our union. So C and D are just two arbitrary fuzzy sets. And right below here, it's the formula for how to calculate the union. And the formula is just basically saying that you have to compare elements with the same lower value, and then you take the maximum. So for example, yeah, operations are only performed on the degree value itself. So let's see, like 0.75, 0.6. We compare, we pick 0.75 because it's the bigger value. And again, it's important to note out that the lower value remains unchanged, and kind of, like I said before, it's not a fraction. The line actually represents the delimiter. And with the intersection, it's the same concept, except we're now comparing the minimum. So we have union with maximum, intersection with the minimum. Now the final operator is called the complement, or in Boolean logic is also known as the negation. And in Boolean logic, if you have true, it would become false, false, true. But here, fuzzy logic does it a little bit differently. So here, to find the complement, we just subtract the membership value from the whole, which is 1. So as you can see here, like 1 minus 0.75, we get 0.25. And again, just an illustration of all the 3 operators that we just learned. We have a union with the max operator, intersection with the minimum operator, and complement with the subtracting from 1. Okay, now with the fuzzy sets and with operators, we're able to create a fuzzy logic system. So kind of this is the blueprint. So how do we architect it? So we'll have an input, which is crisp, meaning many values. Then we fuzzify the information using similar to the modes of transportation set. And then we get to this intelligence spot. So that just means we apply the rules using the operators that we discussed to create a rule base for the sets. And what's really awesome about fuzzy logic is that there's flexibility when it comes to making the rules. For example, I can create my own rule base. Even though there are some established algorithms, it's still the programmer has the flexibility. And after that, you again just use the flip side of logic of this part to eventually defuzzify and create a crisp output set, which a computer could then process. All right, so now with an understanding of the fuzzy logic system, in the past couple decades, there have been a lot of awesome applications spanning fields of finance and medicine and consumer products, which is what I'll be talking about today. So here I have a picture of a washing machine and comparing how on one end we have how a crisp representation of a washing machine really only offers the chance to either be cold or hot. As opposed, we now see the fuzzy set representation has various degrees of membership that would allow for warm temperature or pretty cold, very cold. And again, this just kind of shows the importance that fuzzy logic has in that it's closer to even the way we talk. And now a theoretical application that was actually the focus of my research is called co-intensive precisation. And taking this quote from Dr. Rosenhaus, there are not many concepts in science that are as pervasive as the concept of precision. So to explain what co-intensive precisation really is just creating formalized modes of representations especially for fields dealing with a lot of subjective information. A lot of the work has been done on human-centric fields, including economics, linguistics, and law. And as I was conducting my research, I noticed a gap in the literature when it came to using this tool for sociology. As a result, one of the key findings from my research was that fuzzy logic would be a good basis to create stronger analytical frameworks for social theories and also to model complex and dynamic interactions in society. And now as I'm wrapping up my presentation, I hope that you've all learned something about fuzzy logic, whether it be its origins or how to create a fuzzy system. And my research, like I just said, was I began with searching for the limits of classical logic and its applications in the real world. And from this research, I now know my next steps are actually going to be to use fuzzy logic to create models that better represent social systems. And their future steps, not just for me, but also especially for people interested in computer science. Right now, I know a lot of people in artificial intelligence, machine learning experts are using fuzzy logic as the basis for creating more robust deep learning algorithms. So there is a lot of work to be done and the future looks pretty fuzzy. This is my works cited and thank you all for listening. Are there any questions?
Well, I have a question, yeah.
Of course.
First of all, this was amazing. Like, I've been interested in this topic for a while and you broke it down so well. I really like your conclusion about it being a good option for finding like a stronger analytical framework for social sciences. What I'm wondering though is I can see how fuzzy logic would work really well for things like temperatures where you can get this objective measurement of the degrees. How do you think that would apply to the social sciences without bringing like subjective opinion into it?
Yeah, so thank you for your compliment. Thank you for your question. Right now, the social theories, at least ones that I've studied more on like functionalism and mostly focused on Durkheim's, is they use formal logic right now. And I don't know how it, like, because you said subjective experience, we have not created like an ideal computational method, but using fuzzy logic, I'd be able to capture areas of vagueness or imprecision that the current models just do not account for. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Thank you. Awesome job again.
thank you.
Yeah, I had a quick question. So I think, first of all, this was an awesome presentation. Everything was super clear and well presented. And I was really curious if you've looked into the possible applications of fuzzy logic with regards to quantum computing, because I know that is sort of like the dual states where it's like not fully in one category or in another, but you have that sort of gray area. And I'm wondering if fuzzy logic had sort of a place in quantum computing, or if that's, yeah, an area that you looked at.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny question. I was actually, a lot of my research was inspired by the big shift in physics from the mechanics to the quantum aspect. I'm interested, but I think I still need to acquire a lot more knowledge about quantum computing itself. But yeah, no, I'm definitely interested in checking that out. And
I have a question.
yeah, what's up?
So what made you interested in, understanding fuzzy logic and then applying it to social systems?
So I think my interest in logic has been there since a kid. I mean, for fun, my dad and I would solve a lot of logic puzzles. And I also grew up with the Hindu culture and kind of at the BC time, there was a lot of work in Hinduism and Buddhism, like in that school of thought, kind of creating, like they used logic structures that were not binary, and that fascinated me. And also a lot of 1920 like logicians works, like Tarski and Gödel. I just found it fascinating. So it was just more of an interest of mine I wanted to explore.
Yeah, very cool. It was a great presentation, and I really liked the way how you were well spoken in the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do we have
So
any more
Meg,
questions?
Yeah, I have a question here. So Megan, if I was going to look at your career in 2 years and you're doing a senior thesis, is this something that's going to be connected to it? What are you going to be focusing on? Because you did a great job presenting. I thought you did just super clean, super clear, but also I'm really intrigued about your next steps. What do you think you're going to be focusing on for some of your research ideas?
Yeah, so, well, right now my dream life trajectory would be eventually to get my PhD in I think Berkeley is one of the few schools that has a PhD in logical methods and sciences. So I don't know if I'd stick with fuzzy logic, but definitely keep fuzzy logic as one of my options, maybe, and then continue to see its applications in human-centric fields. I enjoy sociology and I enjoy logic and math, so continue interweaving them.
And this is a question that maybe Zhika can help me with. Zhika, are you still in connection with Minor Mian, who went up to UC Berkeley?
I haven't heard from her lately, and I thought to try to catch up with all my former club presidents and honor students to actually have a Zoom conference with my math club for the spring. So I promised to my math club to track down the addresses of Brandon and Mian and all that. So I didn't do a good job on this. Yes, few of my former students contacted me, but not Mian lately, so I cannot tell you anything.
Well, my connection here is that Minor studied at UC Berkeley, and she was in this field of quantum mechanics, artificial intelligence, fuzzy logic. And so maybe the two of you can get a connection through Zhika. I know if Zhika reached out, that would be a great person with your dreams of attending UC Berkeley that maybe can help you prepare and think and grow a little bit. So that could just be a great connection there. Because as I was listening to you, I was also seeing Minor, and she was an amazing honor student and navigator in our program. And I know Zhika can help you connect. And I think that would be a great opportunity for you.
Yeah, no, that would be awesome.
And that's really a great tradition that we had. Always one generation of students, especially for Berkeley. I don't know why for UC Berkeley always, but it was always one generation kind of welcoming the next generation of honors to Berkeley, telling them ins and outs of the school, and or when we go to that Berkeley Stanford conference, they also get together and all that. So that was a great tradition, and we should really definitely nurture it in these times as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Great job,
and
Meg.
the great presentation. Yeah, I liked it really a lot. Very nice.
Were there any more questions for Meg? No, well,
I'll
thank you.
ask
Oh, okay, go
That
ahead,
was
Kate.
an awesome presentation. In regards to what you specifically want to look at on the like social aspect of fuzzy logic, is there something specific within that you want to look at?
Right now, I'm still not too sure whether I want to stick, because I know like when it comes to social networks, there's a lot of research actually being done in a more with a more scientific approach. I know one of my options is to look at the current analytical like functionalism or conflict theory, and then maybe try to create a stronger representation with fuzzy logic. Yeah.
Cool. Really interesting topic. Well presented.
Thank you.
Can I just make one more comment? For example, one place where I felt that I was really facing the fuzzy logic is when we had the voting for propositions a couple of months back, you know. So for a few propositions, I wasn't sure which way would I go. I would probably go 70% on 130, not 1 or 0, you know. So generally that's one case. The other case is I always felt that it's really not fair for our grades to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Why don't if a student has 78%, why don't I assign the grade 0.78 and then that one participate? I have no idea why are we rounding up or down. Maybe in the old times when it was complicated to calculate things, it made sense. Now with computers, why are we really rounding the grades and make some unfair decisions, because students that are almost whole grade apart end up with the same grade just because of that rounding. So this is another example. And one more, I started to trust my blood pressure monitor, because Omron said in their manual, they said, we use fuzzy logic to measure your blood pressure. And I said, all right, you must be doing a good job. A couple of comments from me.
Yeah, no, thank you. I didn't even think about the grading system, but yeah, exactly. That's a perfect application. And also was in the discrete math class itself at the beginning, our first topic was about propositional calculus, when I realized that I could take my interest in logic and actually apply it to research. So.
Well, thank you, Meg. That was a great presentation. I appreciate all the questions as well from the audience. We're going to go ahead and move on to the second presentation of the morning. Okay. Let me share with this. All right, great. So our next presenter is Caitlin Hume, and her mentor was Dr. Annie Roberts. She'll be presenting on restoring myelin, advances in understanding mechanisms of demyelination and developing treatments for remyelination in multiple sclerosis, an overview of therapies for multiple sclerosis aimed at slowing molecular mechanisms that can cause demyelination and repairing damage in the central nervous system. All right, Caitlin, whenever you're ready, go ahead and get started.
Okay. Go ahead and share my screen. So you should at this moment see Yosemite Half Dome there. And let me start the presentation. All right, can everyone see that okay? All right, so yes. Hi everyone. My name is Caitlin Hume, and today I'm going to be presenting on the topic of multiple sclerosis, and specifically the myelin in our central nervous system that is destroyed and targeted in patients with MS. And then there's some really fascinating and promising current research, very current research that's coming out of UC Irvine right now in regards to actually repairing and restoring that myelin. So let's get started. So first, what is multiple sclerosis, more commonly known as MS? It is a immune-mediated disease that damages the central nervous system, in which the body's immune system attacks structures and cells such as the myelin. The cells, they're called oligodendrocytes. Those actually create and produce the myelin. And the nerves themselves, rather than an autoimmune disease, which is quantified by your immune system actually targeting a specific antigen that then creates an antibody against it. So most experts believe MS is an autoimmune disease, but right now there's no specific antigens that have actually been identified in patients with MS. There's multiple risk factors of developing MS, although there is currently no known cause right now. And there's also no cure. But to date, there is approximately a dozen different FDA approved drugs on the market right now. And in this year alone, there were 4 approved. So the future is bright in hopefully finding a cure. So I want to talk a little bit more about what MS targets. That actual structure it targets is the myelin sheath that coats the axon of a nerve fiber. And so they're like these little jelly donuts that kind of just insulate and then protect the axon of the myelin. They're produced, like I said, by these oligodendrocytes, and they help to allow for fast nerve impulse transmission down your nerves throughout the central nervous system and ultimately your body. And so this is why myelin is so important in MS, is that it not only protects and electrically insulates those nerve fibers, but it allows for fast signal conduction down our electrically excitable nerves within the central nervous system and ultimately throughout the whole body here. So it allows us to have that kind of turbo boost as the nerve impulse is going down that axon. So if you've ever played Mario Kart 64, if you get that turbo boost, you go a lot faster. And so that's what happens as that impulse goes down the axon. The myelin is able to keep that signal going really quickly. So you can thank your myelin for being able to speak coherently during a presentation, picking up a fork, waving, or going for a run on a lunch break. And so as we're going to see, damage to that myelin really interferes with that fast signal transmission. And then that chronic damage can result in a host of different clinical signs and symptoms that you see in patients with MS. So now that we've got a little bit of our bearings, I wanted to just touch upon that, we've defined what MS is, and that key target in MS is myelin and why it's so important, and its proper impulse conductivity for proper motor function. And so with the rest of the presentation, I'd like to go through just a little bit of what happens when the myelin is damaged, and then take a detailed look at that recent UC Irvine-led study on remyelination. So how does the myelin become damaged? So it's a complex system, but our bodies respond to invaders and pathogens thanks to the immune system. So unfortunately, because the immune system looks at myelin as an invader, it responds as it should, and accordingly, by creating inflammatory responses that the cell then recruits activation of these immune cells that release antibodies to then attack the myelin and stop what it deems as an invader. And so that then destroys, it opsonizes those myelin peptides, it opsonizes those oligodendrocytes. And then over time, as you can see, there's a deterioration, which then exposes that axon. But I do want to note that this process is just one injury here, the step 1 through 4. And that cause is really underlined by neuroinflammation. So over time, as we'll see, the nerve fibers become completely bare. And we'll see why that's so important. And that consequence is demyelination. So this chronic continued process of myelin injuries leads to this complete destruction. And when the nerve becomes exposed and damaged, the impulse signal conduction loses its turbo boost there, and it can no longer quickly zoom down the axon, and rather it leaks out of the sides. So as we'll see, no more turbo boost. So that conduction moves a lot slower. You don't have that same sort of quick impulses. And so what winds up happening is you see clinical signs and symptoms in patients with MS where you'll get numbness in the extremities. Patients will experience electric shock sensations, decreased motor functions, decreased ability to walk, a loss of balance, and blurred vision, just to name a few. And this does vary depending on the type of MS that you have. So some of the really good meat that I wanted to talk about within the presentation is some of the ongoing research and some of the very recent and current research in UC Irvine. They came out with a recent study to look at remyelination in patients with MS. So this study is very recent. It came out September 25th of this year. And some of the key findings is that, well, let's back up the function, or the study looked at the function of N-glycan branching and N-acetylglucosamine as a primary regulator of myelin production and repair. So N-glycan is a glycoprotein that is essential in the formation of new myelin, and specifically it coordinates that differentiation of immature myelin cells into mature myelin cells to then produce that myelin. And N-acetylglucosamine is necessary for the compound N-glycan to create this branching effect and actually make and regulate that new myelin and repair that myelin. So both of these play a critical role in the repair, remyelination, and the new formation of myelin. So in this study, multiple experiments were conducted to test the hypothesis of N-acetylglucosamine, which, as you'll see, it is short for that GLC-NAC, as an oral treatment to ultimately promote myelination and reduce demyelination. The experiment I wanted to focus on specifically looked at 2 types of adult mice to determine N-acetylglucosamine's effectiveness on repairing myelin damage. So within the procedure, 2 types of mice were treated with CUPRIZONE, which induces demyelination within the brains of mice by 3 weeks. And then there's max damage that's shown at 5 to 6 weeks. And at this time frame, at this height, the immature myelin cells were typically mature. And so that's when you would start to see the rebuilding and repair of the myelin. There were 2 types, like I said. The MGAT5 mice were genetically altered to remove the gene that's involved with the N-glycan branching, which is essential in forming myelin. And then there was the wild type mouse, which just had no genetic modifications at all. And within this, what they did is they tested the effectiveness of acetylglucosamine. Mice were tested on an accelerated rotarod during active and recovery treatment. So active phase treatment, mice were treated with that acetylglucosamine during the final 3 weeks while they were still on the CUPRIZONE, which was demyelinating the axons at the time. And then they also treated the mice with the acetylglucosamine after the CUPRIZONE had completely stopped. So, as we know, myelin is necessary for optimal motor function. And so in testing this, mice were trained on an accelerated rotarod a week before active treatment and then tested once a week during the active treatment. and also then tested 3 times a week during the recovery treatment when they were no longer on the CUPRIZONE and just taking the N-acetylglucosamine. And then if a mouse wasn't running for 3 turns, it was considered a fall. So this tested the motor function of the mouse's ability, and that motor function is a result of that quick transmission down the axon, as we learned, which thanks to myelin, it either does or does not move quickly. So this is just a quick YouTube video. It's only 19 seconds, but as you can see, the rats or the mice will walk on this kind of treadmill, and within the study in UC Irvine, if they didn't hang on after 3 turns, this is turning, that was considered a fall. So that looked at the motor function of the axon there. So some of the key results and finding is, not surprisingly, those mice on the rotarod had a worse performance with the CUPRIZONE treatment, but with the N-acetylglucosamine, the amount of falls decreased and performance improved during both the active and the recovery treatment. When N-acetylglucosamine was provided during the final 3 weeks of a 6-week CUPRIZONE exposure in wild-type mice, results showed that N-acetylglucosamine prevented loss of motor function. It increased the myelin producing cells and those levels and reduced axonal damage. As you can see, it's a little hard to see here, but this was the control. So we can see within the wild type mouse here, it has a lot more myelin that was produced, and it's looking at this area right here. And then these down here, this is an amyloid precursor protein, and so the reduction of this protein is a positive trend in the remyelination. So as you can see, after treatment with N-acetylglucosamine, there's less of this protein. Comparatively, when we're looking at the recovery phase treatment, I didn't put my little header there, but this is the recovery phase treatment. In figure E at the top here, we can see that at 2 weeks in wild type mice, the N-acetylglucosamine increased levels of those myelin producing cells, the myelin and the mature oligodendrocytes, where it shows the mature cells that actually produce the myelin. While reducing the amount of the degraded or destroyed myelin deterioration. And then in figure F, we can see comparatively at 4 weeks within the mice that were genetically altered to remove that N-glycan branching, they had a increase in myelin development even still. So as you can see, it's not as strong here down at this bottom one, but there still was an improvement in that remyelination. So the results ultimately indicate that acetylglucosamine and N-glycan branching together can promote myelin repair and provide neuroprotection to the axons following myelin damage. So in conclusion and looking forward, with this study, N-acetylglucosamine is uniquely positioned as a therapeutic to reverse 3 major targets within MS, all those inflammatory immune cell responses, and then really does generate that myelin repair. It's currently a very safe and inexpensive alternative and therapy, and there is no current MS therapy currently that has such a diverse mechanism of action there. So it is currently available as a dietary supplement. So coupling this dietary supplement with an oral dose of N-acetylglucosamine could provide potent, inexpensive, and safe therapy. And while there's strong evidence of this, large double-blind studies would still need to be conducted in humans for further investigation. But it is very promising to target that inflammation and repair myelin in patients with MS. So just a couple takeaways that I'd like you to leave with today is just, we learned about multiple sclerosis as a very complex progressive immune-mediated disease that attacks and damages the myelin in the central nervous system. We realized how important myelin is for that quick electrical impulse transmission, allows me to move my hands and speak clearly. And we recognize that neuroinflammation is that kind of key driver to myelin deterioration. And we looked at how critical this research that UC Irvine and other institutes are doing on the remyelination process in patients with MS, and how N-acetylglucosamine is a very promising therapeutic moving forward. So the future is very bright. I'm optimistic. I think we all need that this year a little bit more now than ever. But with that, I'll take any questions, and thank you for your time, and hopefully you walked away learning something fun today.
Yes, thank you, Caitlin. I really appreciated the structure of your presentation, and I like the little checkpoints here and there, helped as being part of the audience to really understand what you were trying to get across. It was really great and very detailed. So thank you for that. I have a quick question. So are there any mechanisms that intensify or that make myelin damage worse?
Yes, actually, I will going to share my screen actually just one more time. I'll just pull this over here. But there was a lot of information. There was a lot of research done. So I just wanted to touch upon a couple other mechanisms that really do intensify this damage. One specifically that I wanted to look at, and I'm sorry, this is pretty small here, but really the oxidative damage that happens within the myelin sheath, that basically as it gets exposed, that oxidative damage then creates this inflammatory effect that contributes to that. There's also different enzyme expressions, and how the body and the myelin is actually using glucose affects the ability to repair itself. Also the microgut biome. Patients with MS actually do have a different gut biome than people that don't. So they're looking at that as a factor, as well as a host of other different molecules and genetic factors that lead to that exacerbation of the myelin destruction.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you for that. I'll pass it on to anyone else that might have any more questions for Caitlin.
I have a question, Melina. Caitlin, great job. I think a lot of people don't understand MS. They oftentimes confuse it with other neurological diseases like Parkinson's, and I'm glad that you brought some light to this. I have some family members that have been diagnosed with MS, and I was wondering, what are some of the triggers and factors that increase the risk of developing MS? Are there certain things that contribute to a rise in MS in certain patients?
Well, there's a host of different factors. There's environmental factors, genetic factors, as well as lifestyle factors, infectious factors. So they're looking at a comparison of people who smoke versus not smoking. Smoking has been looked at as a risk to develop MS. Also, interestingly enough, environmentally, people who live farther away from the equator there's been a correlation between people with MS there. Also, infectious factors, there's certain viruses and bacteria that can actually cause and trigger MS. Again, the gut biome, there's a really big connection there. And so there's a lot of research being done right now about that as a trigger as well.
Fascinating. It's interesting that you mentioned distance from the equator, because two of the family members live up in Maine, like North Maine. And I never even thought about that maybe being a factor as part of their potential for why they have it. So interesting.
Yeah, I just to touch on that. I mean, I'm personally interested in this topic because I have family members who have MS too. And it is also too, it is not an infectious disease. So the interesting thing is it's both my aunt and my uncle. My uncle was diagnosed 12 years ago and my aunt diagnosed 5 years ago. Again, it is not infectious. So they both grew up in New York though. So there's so many different factors. They're also talking about people who've been breastfed. It's interesting too with the cells that produce the myelin, it can cross the blood-brain barrier. So there is that transmission from the mother's breast milk. This was another experiment done with mice who were breastfed. They found more myelination or the production of it in the mice that were breastfed versus formula fed. So there's so many different factors and it's just absolutely fascinating. I was trying to just focus on a couple of them.
Again, great job. I'm so happy that you took on this opportunity, and this would be the type of presentation along with Meg's that would look great at that HTCC conference. So I hope that you pursued that. Great job.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, okay. Well, that was very great. And I'd love to see the passion you have about this, Caitlin. It seems like you've really done your research. So thank you for sharing that with us. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Before we go on to the third presentation, I just want to mention that we had a link that was dropped into our chat, and it's just a commentary form. So in case you guys want to fill it out for our presenters, let them know how they did, any tips you have, anything. It's really nice for them to reflect on. So go ahead and fill that out. I can see if I can drop it one more time in there for everyone. I'll drop it during the next presentation. How about that? I'll do that. But thank you again, Caitlin. We're going to go ahead and move on to the final presentation of this session. Let me share my screen one last time. Okay, great. So our next presenter is Kayla Liu, and her mentor was Zika Perovic. She'll be using the curl to understand fluid rotation in 2D and 3D. She'll discuss the notion of curl and use MATLAB to visually illustrate how changes in the fluid motion relate to the curl. All right. Kayla, whenever you're ready,
thank you.
Please go ahead and get started. Yes, thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kayla Liu, and I am from Dr. Perovic's Math 260 class. And I'm going to be talking about ways to understand and describe fluid rotation. Let's get started. So first, I'm going to introduce the concept of velocity vector fields. So definition-wise, a velocity vector field is a function f that assigns each point xy on a coordinate on a domain to a two-dimensional vector. So as we see here, like if this were plotted on a coordinate system, every point has a vector attached to it. And this picture right here is the velocity vector fields for the ocean currents off the coast of Nova Scotia. And as you can see, each one has a magnitude in a direction. And there are also areas such as here where the vectors are more clumped together, or over here where it's more spread out. So we can use that and describe it with divergence. And also here, you can see that the vectors are swirling around this point in the center right here. And we can describe that with the curl. Okay, so divergence and curl are two of the most basic ways to mathematically describe fluid movement. And the divergence captures how the fluid expands and disperses or contracts and collects. And the curl vector captures the idea of how the fluid might rotate. And it's moving around a center point, and it calculates the tendency for the fluid to rotate around that given point. So on this slide, there's a nice illustration of what divergence looks like in terms of the vectors. So here we can see that positive divergence is when they're all moving away from this center point. So it's dispersing. And negative divergence, here they're all moving towards a point. So it's contracting and collecting. And zero divergence is when there is neither expansion or contraction, and they're all moving along the same line or same path, essentially. Okay, so the curl vector field captures the idea of how the fluid might rotate. And a nice way to understand this is like, imagine if you drop a ball into some swirling fluid. The ball is going to obviously drop to the bottom, but first it's going to rotate. And the rotation of the ball is equal to the magnitude value of the vector curl. So in 2 dimensions, we can describe rotation pretty simply, which is angular velocity, which is just change in the angle versus change in time. However, when we get into 3 dimensions, things get a little more complicated. So that brings us to the right-hand rule. So if you hold your thumb out and you curl your fingers around towards your palm, your fingers curl in the direction of the rotation, and your thumb is pointing in the direction of the curl vector. So this is super interesting because it's we can describe 3D rotation with just a single vector. So it gives us quite a bit of information. Okay, this video here gives a nice visualization of the curl of the vector field. So let's start. So as we can see here, there's the vectors and they're pointing in different directions, and we'll see the particles moving in those directions soon. Okay, so we can see these red circles are places where the particles are swirling around. And in these very center dots, there is no rotation because all the rotation revolves around it. You can see here. So these are points where there is 0 curl, and those points are called irrotational, which is pretty self-explanatory because there's no rotation. Let's move on. Okay, so now let's look at how to calculate curl. So given a vector field function, f of x, y, z, if we take the cross product of the gradient and the function, we get the curl of the vector field. So looking at a specific example, if we have f of x, y, z is equal to 4zi, 2x minus 2yj plus 3yk. If we take the partial derivatives as shown here, also it's important to mention that m, n, and p refer to the I, j, and k components here. So m is 4z, n is 2x minus 2y, and p is 3y. So if we take these partial derivatives and calculate it, we end up with the curl of this function is the vector 3, 4, 2. Okay, so this is a graph of the vector field that I plotted on MATLAB. And here you can see the rotation is going in kind of a counterclockwise direction. And this is the curl vector that's pointing out of it. And because what we ended up here was 3, 4, 2, which doesn't have any variables in it, so it's not dependent on where on the graph it is. Basically, the curl is constant throughout. However, it's important to note that this is a really zoomed in picture of the vector field. So we're mostly looking at like one curl, but you can think of it as like little swirls throughout. Okay, now we're going to look at a specific application of the curl. So vertical axis wind turbines rotate on a vertical axis instead of like a conventional horizontal axis that most of us are familiar with. So these turbines are actually really space efficient because they can be placed in closer proximity to each other than the conventional. I'm sorry. Let me share that again. Yeah, so they can be placed in closer proximity to each other, and they can also be placed in urban areas. So that's pretty cool. And we can model the movement of the wind moving through these blades with simulations, and then create a vector field and analyze the movement of the air by looking at the curl of the vector field. So as we can see here, this is the vector field for the movement of the wind moving through the turbine. And on the vector field graph right here, you can see that the wind comes in pretty streamlined from the left, but then as it moves towards the right, there's a lot more rotation and it becomes a lot more turbulent. This circle right here is the place where it was determined to be the blades were the most efficient. So there was less turbulence. As you can see, there's minimal curl in this area. There's a little bit of rotation over here, but overall it's pretty smooth. Also, this graph is from a study for computational flow field analysis for vertical with axis wind turbines. I will mention the source in my references later. And so this is cool because here you can see that there are curls going in the clockwise direction around the blades. However, there's also a curl going in the counterclockwise direction, which affects the efficiency of the turbine. So this is important because if we graph the vector fields and we analyze the curl, we can try to maximize or optimize the design of the wind turbines. Okay, so this brings us to the end of my presentation. So the main points I covered today were that the curl gives the rotational component of a field. And this is useful because it uses minimal calculation to give us a strong idea of the vector field motion. And as we saw in the wind turbine example, the curl of the vector field can be used to analyze important features, and it can help us to optimize the wind turbine design. Okay, and these are the references I used. To learn more about just like how to calculate curl, take a look at the Khan Academy article here, and to learn more about the intuition behind curl, take a look at the Math Insight articles. And this is the article for the computational flow field analysis for the vertical axis wind turbines that I mentioned before. Okay, thank you so much, and feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you, Kayla. That was a great presentation, and I really appreciated all the visuals. It definitely helped me out.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to know, so what made you interested in this topic? And then what do you think was the hardest part of your research?
So what made me interested in this topic was, well, it came up in my course, and also I was watching some presentations from this Stanford professor at homecoming. It was a YouTube video from a while ago, but she was talking about like ways to describe fluid flow, and I found that really interesting. And I was trying to find ways to apply that to the math I was learning, and then we came across the curl, and that just seemed like a perfect fit.
Yeah, great. And then was there like anything that was difficult about your research?
Oh, right, yeah. So what was probably the most difficult about my research was trying to understand the applications. So I spent a lot of time reading over the wind turbine article and understanding how what was going on there and how to apply it. And I found the example of the counter curl really interesting because you wouldn't think that there would be a curl there actually. And there actually isn't a blade where the curl is. It just has to do with the design of the turbine.
Yeah, well, I thought you had a very good understanding about this presentation, and it was very detailed. So thank you for that. And again, I really loved it. So I'll pass it on
Thank
again
you.
to anyone else that has any questions.
I had a question, just in regards to applications. First of all, the presentation was really interesting too. I was even sitting there being like, oh, that is very true. But it looks like this kind of flow could be applied to things like hydroelectricity as well, and not just with like wind turbines, but things with like water and things like that for other renewable energy sources. I know you focused on this one application, but in your research, did you come across any other applications like that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And no, I didn't really look into too many other examples, but that would be a really interesting thing to research. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Really good topic, well presented.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for Kayla?
Kayla, do you happen to know how widespread are these turbines in contrast to those traditional ones that we see everywhere around? Because you mentioned that they are more convenient because they could be also installed in inhabited places. So I was curious, how popular are they?
Okay. Thank you, Professor. And when I was looking at the wind turbines, I found that they actually still aren't like as popular as the conventional ones. I think it's because they're the designs are a little more tricky, and it's also even though they can be placed in closer proximity to each other, the overall efficiency is less than the our conventional ones. So it's kind of like there are pros and cons. But if we could try to maximize the efficiency of it, it would be really helpful because we can pack a lot more into a single field or something and put them on like urban posts and stuff like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And it was a very good presentation, really very, very nice. Yeah.
All right, great. If there are no more questions for Kayla, I think we'll wrap up the session. Any more questions? Yeah, a virtual round of applause to all the presenters as well. So thank you all. I did want to mention that we have another session starting at 11. So if you want to take a little break and then come back and join us, that'd be really great. We have 2 more presenters and then a few more later in the afternoon. But again, thank you to the presenters and everyone joining us today. Professor Sleeper, was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up this session?
Just a shout out to Zika. There are so many community college honors programs that say that you can't have honors mathematics courses. And I always remind them that we have been doing them successfully for years, and Kayla and is a great example of this, right? That we focus on application, we focus on, you know, how it is applied, and it makes such a great presentation. And great job, Kayla. But also I just want to say thank you that we have Ajika on our faculty that have led the way across the state in having honors in mathematics, because so many, you know, still say stubbornly it can't be done, and Jika reminds us, and his students remind us every single semester that honors is best when, you know, all the disciplines have a chance to participate, and I'm so grateful for that. So thank you, Jika.
Thank you for nice work.
I always love the live presentations. Thanks for being here, Alma. Thanks for being here, Wyatt.
Thank you. I'm so excited and nervous.
Good. Good.
You'll do
Well, I'm
great.
grateful that you're here. Melina, why don't you take it away?
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for session B of our last day of OMNI. I'm really excited to see what our two presenters have for us today. Before we go ahead and get started, I'd like to go over some community expectations, if that's okay with everyone. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right. So some of our OMNI community expectations. Know that this is a safe space meant for learning. Practice patience with yourself and others. Speak from personal experience and avoid speaking for others. Give everyone a chance to speak, never interrupt others. If you disagree with someone, ask questions to understand their intent or offer alternate interpretations. Do not repress other people's perspectives, and treat everyone with respect, dignity, and kindness. And I'm sure we're all gonna do that. Oh, I should keep sharing my screen. I gotta show you who's presenting next. So if there are no questions for me, I'm really eager to get into these presentations. Is that okay with the presenters? Yes, okay, great. And I appreciate the audience for being here today. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with Alma Cuervas, and her mentor was Professor Donna Fazio Di Benedetto. She'll be presenting on the criminal mind. She'll take a deeper look into the criminal mind by analyzing brain development as well as criminal theories. So Alma, if you are ready, I'm gonna go ahead and let you share your screen and get started with your presentation.
I had trouble finding the unmute button.
All good.
But anyways, I am presenting the criminal mind. Oh, does it not let me open? Okay, anyways, the 4 theories of crime that I wanted to present was, there's many theories of crime, just saying, like, I just wanted to select 4 to keep it nice and simple and to just like keep it streamlined. So the first theory of crime is pretty obvious. It's like biological, and that genetics has a play in behavior. And a way of explaining like the biological theory is that the biological theory is set around factors that affect the baby before it is born. So one of the criminals that I am presenting today has a falls into the biological theory. And I wanted to make it fun and implement some Zootopia characters, and the character that I chose for biological, I think everyone knows what it is. Nick Wilde as a baby. Yeah, I don't know why I just, but anyways, the second theory of crime is classical. And this theory bases on the person weighs the consequence and the crime, and in their eyes, the crime is more beneficial to them. So this is your classical criminal, just wants to run away from crime, and I did Mr. Big, which is quite ironic since Nick Wilde and Mr. Big don't really match. So anyways, sociological theory is on the social environment, and in the criminals that I researched, I mostly researched serial killers and not your everyday typical like criminal. So of course it's going to be different in a different situation, and it gets pretty warped. So like an example like sociological theory would be someone like steals diapers for a baby because in their situation they can't afford it. But in my presentation, I'm focusing on serial killers, which is like something totally different, and I just wanted to get that out there. And for our Zootopia character, it is Assistant Mayor Bellwether. I think everyone already expected that, but moving on to the interactionist, these criminals associate with other criminals and they view them as special, or they view them as a role model. And there you go, Weaselton. Moving on to nature versus nurture, one of the questions that I wanted to answer myself was, what is aggression, and how is it acquired? Is it acquired by nature or nurture? And the basic answer for aggression is defined as hostile or violent behavior or attitudes towards another. And it is important for me to like explain aggression because there are two types of aggression: hostile and instrumental aggression. Hostile is impulse behavior motivated by a desire to hurt someone, and instrumental is premeditated behavior used as means to some other end. And the serial killers that I researched kind of fall into the instrumental aggression, but they also one of the killers falls into the hostile, which is quite interesting to see that in a serial killer because that's not what you mostly think of. And I researched Albert Bandura and his social learning theory. And in Albert Bandura's experiment, he learned that aggression is learned, and it is predominantly learned in children because their brain, they want to match their parents, so they're most susceptible to just like monkey see, monkey do. And his experiment consisted of 3 groups of children. One group was put in a room and shown a violent video where actors were shown punching and kicking a doll called Bobo. And after the video, the children were directed into a new room with the same Bobo doll, and their behavior towards the doll was recorded. And the same instructions were done to the other 2 groups, except for the video with both the violent video that they watched was like different. So for group 2, they watched a video where the actors somewhat played rough with the doll, and the last group watched absolutely no video. And the first group was more likely to act aggressively towards the doll than the other 2 groups. So this raised my question over if a criminal is born or made. And after researching the Bandura experiment, I noticed that the only thing that ever changed was the videos and the environment that the kids were in. And moving on to like the nature side of this is dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter and manages aggression as well as mood, motivation, and behavior. There was an experiment done on rats where the levels of dopamine were examined, and the researchers found that both low and high dopamine levels caused aggression, but in different ways. So high dopamine levels often resulted in aggression, being more competitive, and low impulse control, and can be linked to ADHD, binge eating, and addiction. And low levels of dopamine can cause people to become less motivated and can be linked to depression and schizophrenia. Of course, this is not, I'm generalizing this towards the criminals that I researched, not everyone. So of course, not everyone's gonna have these. Don't worry, I promise. If you have something, you're probably not a serial killer, you're not gonna be a serial killer. Yeah, that's my take on that. And I think I have to emphasize that because most people are gonna be like, oh no, I think I have this. I have low levels of dopamine. Am I a serial killer? No, you're not. I promise you, you're not a serial killer. So this was my research on serial killers, not on the generalized population. That's all I have to say on that. And we move on to mental health. So there are social factors that take into consideration of mental health and getting, having a mental illness, which is like death, a parent has a mental illness, the parent's criminality, overcrowding, economic hardship, abuse, neglect, and exposure to violence, which a lot of the criminals that I researched had in common, especially death, which is like really hard for me like to research that and then having to see that like a bunch of like serial killers saw that at a young age. And then one thing that like kind of surprised me was that mental health was linked to like overcrowding. And as I researched it more, I found out that at least 20% of inmates report having problems with mental health. So that was like a red flag for me, and I did not like that, obviously, for like obvious reasons, because overcrowding is like a very big problem here. Anyways, my slide decided to jump forward. And yes, one of the criminals that I examined was none other than Ted Bundy. Why? Because he is very notorious, and I feel like everyone wants to know more about Ted Bundy. And a little bit of his backstory, I researched. So he lived in Philadelphia with his parents. His parents and grandmother and grandfather, like pretty much his whole entire family. But his Bundy's grandmother reported having depression and agoraphobia. And to those who don't know what agoraphobia is they are afraid of going out and being in like elevators or buses because they fear that they're not going to be able to escape if something bad happens. So that I feel like that kind of had a toll on Bundy. I don't think he would ever go out, but that's just my speculation. And by go out, I mean like go out and like make friends, because his grandmother has agoraphobia. I don't think that she would want to leave the house as much, but that's just my speculation. And his grandfather reported having a raging temper and could have caused physical and psychological abuse towards Ted Bundy, although he did say that they had a wonderful relationship. It's kind of iffy because as a toddler, Bundy placed knives around his around his aunt while she was asleep, and nobody did anything, which is surprising to me. Like that's, and going back to like the social factors is Bundy would have had to seen something so horrific to have placed knives around his aunt. And his aunt said that she was surprised that nobody said anything about it. And everyone thought it was kind of like hilarious that he did that as a toddler. Anyways, they moved to Seattle, and his mom found a stepfather, and Bundy did not like his stepfather, and he would throw public tantrums and started wetting his pants. And he had a speech impediment, which caused bullying. And then so his mom never really knew the father of Ted Bundy. So there was like the speculation that he was illegitimate, and he found out through his cousin, because while they were visiting, his cousin just like jabbed at him, "Oh, you're illegitimate." And that's when he found out that he didn't have a dad. And he reported that his friends tried to console him, but he was inconsolable, and he just did not want, he would not put that back. So that was kind of a grudge against his mom, and would explain like his anger towards his stepfather. Also, like Bundy was kind of a narcissistic because he wanted all the attention on him. Also, as a teen, he liked creating traps for people. He liked digging holes and then covering them with leaves like we see on a cartoon, and then people fall in them. He thought that was funny for some reason. But now we move into the brain, obviously. So they labeled Ted Bundy as a necrophiliac, which means he likes dead corpses. And necrophilia can be linked to conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder, as well as bipolar disorder. And what is being seen on the screen right now is a highlighted frontal cortex. To be specific, it's the orbital frontal cortices. And if they are damaged, it would cause impulse control, and decision-making would be going down, as well as decreased emotional responses and personality changes. And some links to this would be, so in 2010, they did a research on mental health, and they found that schizophrenia and bipolar disorders are less able to correctly identify odors, as well as they rate the odors to smell more pleasantly than they really are. And smell is partially processed by the orbital frontal cortices. And so damage to the orbital frontal cortices can be because of dysfunction or maldevelopment in those with antisocial personality disorder, conduct disorder, major depression, or schizophrenia. So when you smell something, the emotions are linked to that. So when if I smell a perfume that I smelled when I was like really happy, when I smell that perfume, I would feel happy because of that emotion, that memory that I have linked. So to I guess like Ted Bundy, whenever he smells dead corpse, it would be like comfort and nostalgia to him. But what is really interesting is that when he died, they took his brain and they examined it, and there's no sign of damage to the frontal cortex. And even though he said that he had banged his head on multiple drawers because he felt bad for killing all those people, there was no damage at all. So what I came up with was that he would be characterized in the sociological perspective, because to him, being bullied and having all these things going around him, probably seeing something that he shouldn't have, caused him to be like this. And also I said that biological, because his grandmother already had was reported to have depression, and that's kind of linked to the orbitofrontal cortices. So yeah, so that's kind of just like my take on it. And then the next criminal example that I would be showing is David Berkowitz. His background is quite short because he was adopted and by a mother and father in a middle class society, but his adoptive mother died of cancer at a really young age, and then his adopted father left him. So there's that component of that. And after that, he felt that the world was conspiring against him. So he would commit these crimes because he thought that they wanted to kill him. So he would rather kill them rather than them killing him. And he was an antisocial, and that's kind of like the basis of the criminals that I examined. They're mostly like people who got bullied. Like David, he got bullied because he was kind of like on the heavier side. So there's obviously that component. And then the paranoid schizophrenic is because he would hear voices and he thought that the demons were telling him to kill. And there are movies that are like very specific on that. And I think one of like his most like famous or notorious kills, well, he attempted to kill, was the black dog, sorry, because he thought that the demons were telling him to kill. And I placed him in the sociological because the things that went around him influenced what he became. And then we're moving on to Charles Manson. So Charles Manson had a very sad childhood. He didn't really even have a childhood because his mom was already in prison when he was born. She committed armed robbery and she was in prison for 10 years. So that's basically his entire childhood. And he moved in with his aunt and uncle. And so like prior to the mom committing the armed robbery, she had a boyfriend by William Eugene Manson, who gave him his last name Manson. He was a heavy drinker, so that wouldn't have been done any good to Manson, as he saw his, like the people he knew growing up in that situation, it wouldn't have been well at all. Anyways, they were divorced after 3 years later. His mother, Kathleen, was also an alcoholic, and she had left Charles with like multiple babysitters, like just leaving him alone, not wanting anything to do with him. And then later, so when Charles was with his aunt and uncle, he moved to West Virginia, and then he would commit like like minor robberies, and then they would put him in like schools, but then he would just like not do anything. And then they would reunite, his mom and him reunited, but he would just always cause trouble. And what is important, I think, is that he never really killed anyone, but it was his followers that killed. And when he was caught, he was just like, I never told them to kill, I just told them to make it less messy. Which, I mean, is pretty vague, but he never killed it, but he conspired it. And again, he's like antisocial. He never really wanted to make friends. He liked bullying others rather than being bullied. And then for our last killer, I put Richard Ramirez. So he had an interesting childhood because his mother worked in a boot factory, and as a result, all of his siblings, including him, had birth defects, and this ranged from breathing difficulties or respiratory difficulties to bone deformities. And at 5 years old, a drawer fell on top of him, hitting his forehead. So I think you guys know what I'm going for. I'm going for the orbital frontal cortices, which, as I had presented earlier, would kind of just, the personality of the person would change. And that was like seen in like Engage for the railroad worker. And anyways, so he developed epilepsy after falling off a swing and being like knocked out. And then his cousin Miguel came back from the Vietnam War and would show him gruesome pictures of him like mutilating people. And then when he was a young teen, Miguel killed right in front of Richard Ramirez. And I think that really took a toll on him. And then, yeah, that's like, I really think that he would be classified into like the biological and interactionist components, because like his mom already had complications before he was born, so that falls into the biological theory. And then interactionist with his cousin, they would both go and do stuff. And then he was also like a heavy drug user, so that didn't help his mental state. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation.
Great, thank you, Alma. That was very interesting. I think this is a topic that, personally, it's interesting to learn about, but I don't necessarily do my own research on it. But when I hear about it, it's really intriguing to understand some of, what may have caused some of these criminal actions to happen. So I appreciate it. I think we'll go ahead and start our Q&A session. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead, raise your hand, type it in the chat, whatever it may be. But I'll go ahead and get started actually. What made you want to research this? Or maybe that, and then also why did you pick these criminals to discuss?
So I think I picked to research them because everyone thinks like they're a criminal, they're bad, or they're born that way. And then they kind of get a bad rap. Well, I mean, they do because like they killed someone, but then they think that they're soulless. And I kind of wanted to find out like what went wrong and could they have gotten help. And then looking at like the overcrowding, I wonder if we could do something about overcrowding to minimize the mental disorders or mental illnesses that the prisoners have in order to rehabilitate them into society again. And then I chose the criminals. Well, Ted Bundy, he's like really notorious, and I feel like everyone's like, what did Ted Bundy do? But yeah, during his interview, he would like lie about stuff, so they didn't really believe him. So when they like examined his brain and found out that he's like a total healthy brain, they kind of disqualified everything else that he said, which is why when he said that his grandfather and him had a great relationship, they kind of disqualified that. And I chose the others kind of randomly because I don't know why I chose the other ones, but I feel like I chose Richard Ramirez because of his like brain injuries and his epilepsy, and I wanted to like show that he had a biological defect that kind of caused him to go this way. And what is interesting is that all the other criminals would kill like specific people, and Richard didn't. He kind of he kind of just like killed whenever he had the chance of killing. It was kind of like Among Us. he just like kind of just killed for just not for the fun of like kind of for the fun of it, but then at the same time he said that he couldn't really control it. In one of the murders, he said that he was strangling a girl with a telephone wire, but he saw the sparks fly out, so he thought that that was God's like signal that he shouldn't kill her, and he didn't kill her. So, yeah.
Very interesting and just wild, but thank you for sharing. I am going to just read one from the chat. Brandon typed a question. He just said, what was the most interesting criminal to you?
Oh, the most interesting criminal. Oh gosh. I would have to say all of them because they all had like a different component. For like Ted Bundy, everyone kind of like knows him as being like crazy, but then I was like, I want to give him a chance to explain himself through like his like background and stuff. But then I was like, nope, he really is just a crazy person. And then for who was it? Oops, I forget. Who did I research? Sorry. For David Berkowitz, it was quite interesting to find that so as a child, he also saw a lot of death, which is like, I got sad because of that, because he saw, I didn't really want to go into detail because I didn't really want to put that stuff out there, but he saw a mom and a daughter being run over by a car. So that was kind of like, oh, yeah, he like, kind of like a no wonder he would have like not chosen that path, but he kind of went crazy because of that. And then Charles Manson, I've always been like speculating about Charles Manson because in one of the murders that he committed, well, his followers committed, he murdered the family because the previous family had rejected his music, which I was kind of like, wait, what? Like, it wasn't even the same family in the house. It was totally new people, but he just decided to do that because it was like solely on the house. And then Richard Ramirez was interesting because he actually had like a biological defect again, which like could be linked to the orbital frontal cortices. And I should have presented orbital frontal cortices with Richard Ramirez, but I chose like Ted Bundy because he was just like lying about everything. But anyways, with Richard Ramirez, his like everything about his life was kind of depressing, and I thought I think he was like the only one that could have like not avoided anything because like the biological, the people like he hang around with, his whole entire family was like that.
All right, well, yes, thank you for sharing. Is there anyone else that has any questions for Alma?
I see Chris.
Yeah, so I have a couple questions. The first one is, I know that you're focusing on like biological, but also like what roles does drugs play in changing, chemistry and decision making? Because for instance, like Charles Manson, for instance, did a lot of drugs, and that may have impacted both him and his followers and their decision-making processes. And so have you studied that aspect or component?
Yes, so I went over it in like the first like 2 slides. I don't know if you guys saw the like neurotransmitters. So for dopamine, like I'm just putting out an example because I used it in my slides. For dopamine, if there's way too much of it, it kind of just like causes aggression. So I don't know if that answered the question, but like the brain pretty much just like gets used to that amount of drugs and like dopamine and wants more of it. So that becomes into addiction.
And my second question is, Alma, very interesting. Is science being used in the courtroom to kind of explain these decisions and the violence of these perpetrators? Because oftentimes I see, like, you can explain this very well and it makes perfect sense to me, but is it having an effect on juries? Is it having an effect on governors who can maybe grant clemency? Or, we're seeing a lot of people, being brought to the execution chamber at the end of the Trump presidency. Are these decisions, is science in some ways playing any decision in trying to understand these decisions?
Well, sometimes well, like the lawyer would like present something, but then the way the opposing lawyer would like kind of like rule it out would be like, well, they committed all of these other crimes, and then the jury is kind of like more on the emotional side. So they kind of like one of the examples for like Richard Ramirez, they like instantly just like found him guilty without like really looking into his like background and into like all these things that they could have looked into. So they were just like, yeah, just like send him to die. Doesn't really matter. He's a killer. There you go. That's it. And I feel like society has a like kind of like a rule into that, because when you think killer, you just think soulless, and you don't think that they have like a brain or anything. You think they're just killing because for the fun of it. Which like some of them are and some of them aren't. But yeah, so I feel like science kind of like is kind of like left out of the decisions of like the jury sometimes. And I feel like a factor that really plays a role into like the decision would be like the emotion, because obviously like when you're a victim of someone who died, you want justice, and you don't really look at the like the science perspective of it, and like you just want justice, and that's all you want.
Thank you, Alma. Great job.
Do we have any other questions for Alma? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, Alma. That was a great presentation. If you don't mind, if you stop sharing the screen, so then we can go on to the next presentation. Great work. I also wanted to mention that I believe there was a link put in for, yes, the commentary form. Oh, I'll put it in right now, just so everyone has it. So this would benefit the presenters, so then they can get some feedback on their presentation. So I just went ahead and put it in the chat again, just in case. So feel free to fill that out, okay? And that's for everyone else who's participating and watching. So thank you, Alma. Wyatt, it is now your turn. So let me go ahead and share my screen really quickly. Okay, there we go. All right, so Wyatt's going to be presenting next. Wyatt Clay and his mentor was Professor Christopher Sleeper. He will be presenting on the Mexican-American War as the first Civil War. This research project has been done with the intent of revealing both the ways that the Mexican-American War characterized the lead up to the Civil War, and the ways that it plays a fundamental role in changing the right and get started.
Thank you. Sorry, there was a little lag in the internet there. I don't know if that was on my end or if other people had that too, but if it breaks up, I'm sorry. But I'll share my screen. And also my dog is scratching on my door.
Don't worry about it. We,
Great.
We're doing our best.
All right, so I'll be talking about the Mexican-American War.
No worries. We'll be focused on your presentation.
Great. This painting is a painting of the Battle of San Pasqual. Ever been to the Wild Animal Park? Right when you turn in, the Battle of San Pasqual happened on the field right across the street from there. So I wanted to start with this image because I think it shows how close to home here in San Diego County this war was. And the Mexican-American War is often forgotten, but for us San Diegans and many Californians, it is somewhat close to home. So here's a little bit of background on the war. It went from 1846 to 1848. It ended with the Americans sieging Mexico City, and then a peace deal and victory resulting in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which meant the United States seizing California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. I'd like to begin with a quote from Ulysses S. Grant. He said, "I do not think there was ever a more wicked war than the war waged by the United States on Mexico. I thought so at the time when I was a youngster, only I had not moral courage enough to resign." Now, I found this interesting because Ulysses S. Grant was a great Civil War general, but he was also known as the Butcher because of how many lives and how many soldiers he lost. And some of the most brutal battles of the Civil War. And for him to consider the Mexican-American War a more wicked war is a really fascinating statement. So I'm going to explore some of those reasons in this presentation. And I'd like to explore why I'm looking at the Mexican-American War as a civil war. So what makes a civil war? I'm not trying to say that the Mexican-American War was a civil war in the same way that the United States Civil War was, but I think it would be a fascinating exercise to understand this war as a civil war and look at it through that lens in order to understand how important it was and how these two countries in the Americas are very closely linked. So how might it be looked as a civil war? That's my first question. And how might that reveal the significance of this war in mid-19th century America? And how might that significance alter our understanding of US identity in the Americas and the place of the United States in the world today? So my thesis is that indeed the Mexican-American War was a truly American civil war because it was defined by the similarities between the two nations, and it acted as a prelude to the Civil War, and it represented a paradigm shift towards empire in America in the same way that we conventionally view the US Civil War. So I'll start with my first point. The Mexican-American War was started and ended due to factors that reveal the true fundamental similarities that Mexico has with the United States. It began with a conflict over slavery, revealing that Mexico was a liberal republic just like the United States, struggling and fighting for these ideas of liberty. And it was won by the United States because of weaknesses in Mexico that were derived largely from factors relating to their origin as a former colony, just like the United States. So first, I'd like to begin with these two images. On the left is an image of a slave auction in Texas. Many of the first settlers of Texas were Anglo-Americans from the United States, going into Mexico, getting these land grants given out by the government, and many of them brought slaves with them. But that contradicted many of the beliefs of the Mexican government. So then on the right, the Guerrero Decree was released, and this is the abolition of slavery in Mexico. About 40 years before the United States ever abolished slavery, Mexico had done it already. And the very fact that they were dealing with this and that this war for Texan independence was fought over this issue of slavery reveals how similar Mexico is to the United States. And here I'd like to compare two pieces of history from the United States and Mexico. On the left, we have a painting of the War of 1812, which of course was fought with Britain not long after our independence. And they tried to retake their former colony in this war in many ways. They burned down the White House. They fought fiercely to try to bring us back into their fold. It didn't succeed, but it caused many problems for the United States, including economic recessions in 1819 and issues that were difficult to recover from. On the right of Isidro Baradas, who was a general from Spain who performed a similar action on Mexico, an attempt at reconquering Mexico a few decades after their own revolution. And the fact that their revolution happened after ours means that this reconquest happened a few decades after our War of 1812, but it had very similar results. Mexico entered into this recession and trade was reduced, and it hurt them economically for a long time to come. And these are some of the big reasons why Mexico lost. They were weakened by this economic downturn and allowed the United States to win. So not only was the war fought over slavery, which is quite American as far as civil wars go, but it also ended and gave victory to the United States because of the fact that both nations were descendants of this sort of colonial heritage. My second point is that the Mexican-American War acted as the first battleground for both the political conflicts of the US Civil War and the military conflicts. So it began as a land grab by Southern politicians in many people's eyes. And it also sparked an abolitionist response from the North. And these tensions really were the first big conflict over slavery in Congress since the Missouri Compromise. And it defined this era in the lead up to the Civil War. But also this war trained the best and the worst of the generals that fought on both sides of the Civil War. And it prepared our army in many ways for that bloody conflict. So here I have two figures in American history. On the left is President James K. Polk. Now he ran as an expansionist president. He has this slogan, 54-40 or fight. And what that means is he promised to his voters that the United States would get from England all the land up to the 54th parallel, which would add land to the north, right? And ultimately free states. And a lot of people were very excited about this. But ultimately, what he did instead do, he compromised on that and brought Oregon much lower to the 49th parallel. And instead, he fought fiercely and fought a war for Mexico, which gave land to future slave states. So this sort of prioritization of the expansion of slave states really sparked a lot of anger in the North. And there was a lot of tension brought out by this because Northerners felt that perhaps slavery would win and rule forever if slave states got Texas and everything to the west. So on the right, I have Senator David Wilmot, and he is part of that Northern response to what Polk did. He proposed the anti-slavery Wilmot Proviso towards the end of the Mexican-American War that would make all these new territories gained free states. Now, his proposal failed, but it sparked a lot of anger in the South, and it inspired many Northerners to keep fighting for freedom in the West. Fascinatingly enough, though, the purpose of the Wilmot Proviso may have failed legally, but it succeeded geographically because the American Southwest is largely desert. It doesn't work well with cash crops, and slavery couldn't expand much farther than the middle of Texas. So ultimately, those states were free anyways. And that in itself guaranteed the end of slavery. Here's a visualization of what I was talking about as far as Polk's expansionist policies and how it prioritized slavery. So in the top, we have the Oregon Treaty, that light sliver that shows how much land was gained for northern free states under Polk. And then these three slices, there's East Texas, West Texas, and the Treaty of Guadalupe, which is California, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico. If you look at Texas alone is larger than what we gained from the Oregon Treaty for the North. And then Texas plus the Treaty of Guadalupe is over a quarter of the modern United States. And by visualizing this, you can understand how Northerners who wanted to preserve this balance of free and slave states really felt that Polk threw their concerns out the window and that all of this expansion was benefiting slave states. Now I'd like to talk about the military factors that made the Mexican-American War a prelude to the Civil War. On the left, I have a young Ulysses S. Grant, and on the right, a young Robert E. Lee, the most famous generals on either side of the Civil War. Both of them are West Point graduates, and both of them earned their stripes in the Mexican-American War. And they learned their battlefield tactics, they learned their successes and failures in the Mexican-American War. So the successes of the Mexican-American War made these two successful generals in the Civil War ultimately. And at the same time, it defined the failures of the Civil War because the Mexican-American War was such a successful victory for the United States. So much land was grabbed without much violence that both sides that learned in the Mexican-American War that would ultimately fight in the U.S. Civil War had this overconfidence leading into the Civil War. The U.S. Civil War began with this sort of idea that it would be a quick and bloodless war. It ended up being the bloodiest conflict in U.S. history. And this is what I'd like to show. You can see that the lives lost in the Mexican-American War are nothing in comparison to the lives lost on both sides of the U.S. Civil War. And these numbers of the Union and the Confederacy don't count the number of prisoners captured and the men that died in prisoner of war camps. What's interesting about this is in the Mexican-American War, very few lives were lost, but so much land was gained. But in the Civil War, no land was gained. The country was hurt afterwards, and it was the same afterwards. So a lot of that success of the Mexican-American War and battlefield tactics defined the Civil War. Now I'd like to talk about the conclusions. I think by sort of comparing the Mexican-American War to the Civil War, we can understand a better view of the mid-19th century America, because often we look at the Civil War as this huge moment that flips America in a lot of ways to what it is today. But I'd rather like to change that view and look at the era from the Mexican-American War to the Civil War as this big monumental shift in American history, because the Mexican-American War gives us all the land to the Pacific. It fulfills manifest destiny, this idea that the United States would rule everything to the Pacific, and it ends that expansion west. So we start to look inwards. and it also creates and sparks those tensions of the Civil War. So it's sort of this era that defines change for America between the Mexican-American War and the Civil War. And I think that's often underestimated. And I think by appreciating Mexico and looking at some of the similarities with Mexico, we can sort of decolonize our view of history, because this war, unlike most wars in American history, there's no way to paint it as a war over freedom. It was a war of conquest. And that is the reason Grant considered it the most wicked war in American history. It was blatant in the conquest, and it was shameful to him for America. And it shows our sort of blatant imperialism against Latin America. And I think also what's important is back to that painting of the Battle of San Pasqual. A better understanding of the Mexican-American War can remind us to appreciate the land that we live in today, that California was once Mexico, and before that it was Spain. And I think that has a lot of implications on our modern discourse on race and immigration in the United States today. Thank you. And here are my citations.
Great, thank you very much, Wyatt. I really appreciate all your visuals and all the pictures you had. It was a great presentation. All right, so if anyone has any questions for Wyatt, we're going to go ahead and get into the Q&A section.
Wyatt, one of the things that we had to do with this project is working with primary sources. Which was the kind of most difficult of the primary sources you had to work with, and why?
Well, that's interesting. The sort of weirdest primary sources, I threw in all the treaties related to my project, and trying to get like real historical analysis and meat out of a treaty is weird. You know, you go to the Library of Congress and it's a very boring thing, but I found that kind of interesting because it is this like living deal. You know, there's some statements about peace and idealism, but it also is sort of just a raw political deal. You know, it's not a speech, it's just this contract almost. So I found that fascinating. The Treaty of Oregon was fascinating. It's written, you know, between the United States and the Royal Highness her Queen and stuff, and Queen Victoria. And I found that really interesting and cool to work with. And to compare that treaty to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which establishes our relationship with Mexico in a lot of ways, this asymmetrical relationship, you know, where the United States sort of determines the conditions of that peace. The Oregon Treaty is in some ways more respectful and equitable.
So Wyatt, you know, this is kind of connected and kind of not. So as we look forward, right, the next, there's, you know, space, obviously as the next frontier. You also, of course, have the Arctic. And so we've oftentimes talked about freedom, and we oftentimes talk about liberty. Do you think that there's going to be a replay of more like the Mexico story of conquest when it comes to the Arctic and space, or do you think it's going to be more of a respectful effort, you might say, by the United States?
That's interesting. I think almost sadly, it might be more like the US Civil War in a way, because as we push into these lands, scarcity becomes the problem. With the Mexican-American War, there was all this extra land sort of that Mexico wasn't using so much, and we don't use so much until a bit later on. And with the Civil War, it was these tiny land grabs, right, with this fighting and stuff, and it was bloody. And I don't know, it's tricky with the Arctic because a lot of these deals are already signed, right? There are sort of rights divided up and stuff, and those conflicts will be over these little ambiguous pieces. And I don't know, it's kind of scary because it's the same thing's true of space, that there's not much to, I mean, of course, space is infinite, but there's little to expand freely. You know, we're competing over every little bit, sort of. With the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, Mexico could have given away that land and still felt confident to survive as a country. But I don't know, it's scary as we don't have these frontiers anymore. Every little piece of land matters.
Great job, Wyatt. Thank you.
I was wondering what specifically about this topic like drawed you in to pursue further research?
I'm really fascinated by Latin American history and sort of how that collides with American history and identity, because we are the United States of America. We often call ourselves American and hold that on ourselves, but there are plenty of Americans in the Americas that we don't consider American. And I kind of want to see how in the future we could have a more equitable relationship that appreciates all Americans, I guess. And the Mexican-American War, to me, seemed like the sort of beginning where we really define the terms of what this relationship is going to be. And in a lot of ways, that has not been an equal and fair relationship.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that perspective. Anyone else have any questions for Wyatt? No, we're all good. All right, great. Well, thank you, Wyatt. I appreciate that. That was a great presentation.
Thank
And then
you.
as well, Alma, thank you for that. We really appreciate you coming forward and sharing your research with us. And I thank you everyone who is here to listen. Another reminder that the commentary form is in the chat. So if you'd like to fill that out just to give some input on what you thought about the presentations, that'd be great for the presenters to reflect on. Other than that, that would be it for this session. Professor Sleeper, would you like to add anything?
No, just a continued reminder that we have invitations coming out this weekend for the HTCC conference. And so if you're interested in submitting a conference proposal, it's due by December 18th. But feel very proud of the presentations that you offered today. And now it's time to rest and breathe a little bit easier. But thank you, Alma. Thank you, Wyatt, for making a great session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you to everyone. And another reminder that there will be another session starting at 12:30. So that'll be the last session of Omni in case you want to join, see what others are working on this semester. But other than that, thank you to everyone that presented and everyone that was watching. We appreciate you. So thank you. Thanks. Feel free to leave or join us.
So I'll quickly go over our community expectations like I always do. Quickly read over that. So if you haven't seen these before, these are 5 community expectations that we have for our presentations for Omni. Know that this is a safe space meant for learning, and practice patience with yourself and others. Speak from personal experience and avoid speaking for others. Give everyone a chance to speak and never interrupt. If you disagree with someone, remember to ask questions to understand their intent or ask for alternative interpretations. Do not repress other people's perspectives and treat everyone with respect, dignity, and kindness. So, with that in mind, let's move on to our first live presentation. Let me introduce them. So first up, we have Karis Tanksley. Your moderator is Pamela Perry, and your project name is Digital Resources for All, COVID-19 Libraries and the Digital Divide. The digital divide grows at an exponential pace, but since the outbreak of COVID-19, libraries have leapt forward in efforts to provide access to all. So, Karis, if you could share your screen and...
Absolutely.
Got it.
All right, hello everyone. Okay, my presentation is, as you heard, Digital Resources for All, COVID-19 Libraries and the Digital Divide. I give a special thanks to to Pamela Perry. Thank you so much for all your help. So the first question that I'd like to start with is, what is a library? When you think of a library, what do they provide? We know just automatically, I tend to think of books, right? But they also have a lot of other physical resources, such as newspapers and maps. And then also, especially since the 90s, you have computers and printers and scanners and calculators, etc. That's going to be important for later. The next question is, who can access these resources? The key word here being access. Access, defined by Merriam-Webster, is the ease with which a person may enter a library, gain access to its online systems, use its resources, obtain needed information regardless of format, and it's also associated with the quality of being able to be located and used by a person regardless of disability, whether a physical location or via the web. Sorry, one sec, I'm going to go back again. Okay, there we go. So, but beyond the physical, recently since the 90s, there's been a move from the physical world of the library to the cloud space, as it is, the digital space. This is called digitization. Oh my gosh, I can never say that word. Digital conversion. The process of moving physical media to digital spaces such as the cloud, flash drives, and digital archives. So another way of, a little more technical, is called the Internet of Things. The reason why I bring up the Internet of Things, which is the industry of connecting mundane objects and tasks to an online network, is because as the internet became more common, it started being connected to more and more regular, normal, everyday objects in our lives. That also drove the cost of these objects up a bit, and that made access to these resources a bit harder. Printers, phones, and calculators even have little chips in them that can send the information to your phone or your app or to computer. So that brings us to the digital divide. The benefits of our technological revolution have been unevenly distributed, unfortunately. Even though 98% of Americans have access to internet service, 1 in 4 does not have it at home. The question then is, where are they getting their internet service, Wi-Fi, and other digital resources? Though the divide has been present since the birth of the internet, as the internet became common, it also became expected. And you'll see this, I imagine you may have run into this when you're working, trying to apply for jobs. You have to go online to apply for most jobs and to find listings of jobs as well. The physical resources that were once available before the internet was common stopped being distributed, especially as environmental concerns were raised. The side effect of that, however, and then a good example of a physical resource that stopped being distributed was the Yellow Pages. I can't really remember the last time that the Yellow Pages was delivered to my doorstep, but the official last shipment was actually in 2019 in the UK. So where do they get these resources? Where do most people who need the physical resources and can't afford the digital ones get them? They go to the library. Now, this that just appeared on the screen is an infographic from the whitehouse.gov from 2015. It's really hard to see, so I'm going to break it down for you. Here you see explaining the digital divide, showing that the most affluent in society tend to have home internet adoption rates about 80–90%, while the lowest medium incomes have home adoption rates of around 50%. Now, let's just pause there for a moment. 50% of low-income households, and that doesn't necessarily include houses as well. Households is just families. So sometimes they live in apartments and sometimes they live in shelters or even on the streets. But they don't have access to Wi-Fi in wherever they are living. The divide is growing. So here, the big red circle here is the US population. 69% of the US population use libraries. And then 32% of the US population use the internet. That's 77 million Americans. This was found from the Pew Research. And here's a great graphic from the Pew Research Center. And it'll show you, again, that 1 in 4 ideas, this number does not change. The previous graphic was actually from 2013. This is from 2018. So you see that those, please focus on the number that's in the middle, says less than 30K. The 25 is a percent. So 25% of US teens that have less than 30K in their families do not have or have access to a desktop or laptop computer at home. Then COVID-19 hit. And I'm just going to let this kind of play through here. It'll show there's an outbreak in inaccessibility as libraries are closing down everywhere. Naturally, that's going to create a problem for everybody who needs access to these resources. In 2010, popping back 10 years, the Institute of Museum and Library Services published a report called Opportunity for All: How the American Public Benefits from Internet Access at US Libraries. And they found through so many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of surveys across all of the states that the American public used the libraries, and specifically the internet in the library, for education, employment and enterprise, health and wellness, to find a doctor, to access government and legal services, to become involved in their community, and to manage their finances. The battle for access absolutely must continue. May I draw your attention to the brown boxes first? These are US teens. 35% of US teens typically have to do their homework on a cell phone, and 12% of US teens use public Wi-Fi to do homework because they had no home internet connection. This was from a Pew Research survey in 2018. But it gets even worse when you focus in on the red boxes for the teens who have come from families with less than 30K. That pops up to 45% needing to do their homework on their cell phones, or even worse, who are unable to complete homework because lack of a reliable computer or internet connection. 21% reported that they used public Wi-Fi to do homework because they had no home internet connection. So where did they go? They go to the library. Shifting the conversation just a little bit, I'd like to talk about libraries as disaster response teams. During Hurricane Harvey in Texas, libraries in Houston served as community centers. There are many reports that was actually just published in 2020 where they interviewed many public employees from the Houston Public Library system, and they reported that the citizens, after the storm, the devastation of the storm, used the libraries for social connection, information, to access Wi-Fi and digital resources as they recovered from the tragedy. One library employee had this wonderful quote: "Everybody's saying, apply for services, apply for services, apply online." Okay, how are they going to do that? We were helping people that didn't know how to use the computers, didn't have email addresses, because you have to have an email address to set up an account. If the libraries are closed, how can they access this? So what are libraries doing to fight this? There are some libraries that are doing absolutely incredible jobs. For example, as you can see here in Georgia and in Virginia, they have whole fleets of vans with hotspots that they're sending out into different neighborhoods. On the side of the van, you can see it says, "For hotspot schedule, call or visit this number and this website." So they've got it right, because sometimes there's kind of a lack of understanding when people are trying to supply the resources to these people that don't have them. They'll send them internet links, but if they don't have the internet connection, how can they get the resource on the web page? You see what I'm saying? So it's a really smart idea to include not just the internet link, but also a phone number so that they can connect to the internet and then access the resources. Here's some, oh, this is just fantastic. So the Georgia Public Library Service provided a map of Wi-Fi access outside of library buildings. Look at all those blue dots. That's wonderful. You can see, however, that there's pretty large spaces where there's no Wi-Fi available, sometimes in pretty big towns. So this was, and then the graphic on the right is concerning their own study on just a survey of libraries in Georgia that left their Wi-Fi on when the building was closed, and other ways that they tried to fight to give access to these digital resources to the community during the shutdown. 44% located Wi-Fi access points to improve access outside library buildings, and 23% were checking out mobile hotspots to patrons. So do you need a library card to access all of these Wi-Fi resources and other both physical and digital resources that the libraries were handing out? According to these librarians, they didn't really care. They figured that if they give these resources out to people, even if they'd never received help from a library before, that afterwards they would get a library card. This is a call to action. If you didn't know about any of these things before, you know now. And more research needs to be done. Funding needs to be given to libraries so that they can actually offer these internet hotspots and these digital resources. Please spread the word if you can. And these are my references. And I just gotta thank you all very much.
Great job, Karis. Thank you. That was very informative. And I'm so glad you talked about it, because it's something that I would never expect. I thought with all the digitization of media and information that it would become way more accessible. But even from the beginning, even before COVID, like that is not the case at all.
Exactly.
So that's very eye-opening to me. And I think as a society, libraries is like the one thing that we got right. Like it's a haven, it's a safe space for people to go, and it's free, and it's like it's there for like just providing free information to the public and resources, and it's something that we can't lose, especially in like these turbulent times. So thank you for that. And we'll go on to the Q&A for Karis. So if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll tell them to Karis for you, or unmute yourself, raise your hand. And yeah, it'll be 5 minutes of Q&A.
I can start off. So great job. I know live Q&As are pretty difficult, but you did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I was terrified.
It was so good. My question is there another solution that you think we should offer? And if not, what do you think is the best solution right now?
The solution to what now?
Library access in times of a pandemic.
Right. Thank you for asking this question. So something that I failed to mention during the presentation is that while, yes, we absolutely need libraries to be able to access all these resources, the safety of everyone is also incredibly important, right? So there are libraries that are, like I said, doing it right. So in Georgia, they have a lot of libraries that they will be open, but there's a limited amount of patrons allowed inside, and the what do you call them? The staff. There you go. The staff are well trained with being able to keep clean, and the sanitization stations. You know, you think about how grocery stores are open, and people need to eat. Well, our brains need to get fed too. So people, I think, should start rethinking how they're thinking about libraries and how important it is. Cool. Who else?
So Karis, do you think this is an issue of like almost civil rights in terms of that the issue of library access is something that should be a higher, should have higher visibility and should be a part of as significant as, you know, making sure that there's polling places and voting booths and all of those sort of things? Do you think there's a correlation there, or am I stretching too far?
Professor Sleeper, I love how you put incredibly inspiring words into question format, because what you just said as a question should definitely be a statement. I absolutely agree with you. This is a civil rights issue, and that's part of why I said it's a call to action for people to spread the word about this. There are so many people that, because of the lack of access to information, not only don't have access to healthcare or the location of a grocery store, but they also don't have access to the education they need to be able to be involved in their community and to be able to even vote.
Well said. Well said. Thank you.
Okay, I see a question here about book sanitization. Thank you, Sharid. That reminds me. There was a really cool invention in Japan that looked like a microwave, but it was just UV light, I guess. But it only takes 30 seconds to sanitize the book when you put it into the UV station. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I put in the chat that most libraries right now are dealing with it by setting the books aside for a certain amount of time, like 4 days or something like that, before they're safe to redistribute because of the time that germs stay on paper. So
Right, absolutely.
So we're finding workarounds, yeah.
And then the curbside drop off and pickup, most libraries are doing that now, aren't they?
Teresa, did you have a question for Karis?
Yeah, that was such an excellent presentation, Karis. And I was just curious, you spoke about these many great resources which the library gives us. And I was wondering if there's even anything else that you didn't have time to cover. Are there any other crucial resources which they provide for us?
Thank you for asking that question. My goodness. Yes, there are a lot of wonderful resources offered by libraries that, and I can't even say that I know all of them because, I'm not a librarian yet. But actually, I don't want to answer that question. I would like to ask Pamela Perry that question. You're a librarian. Could you tell us?
Tell me I am. So what was the question?
So, Karis touched on these amazing resources which libraries have to offer, like, the Wi-Fi and even serving as community centers in disaster. And I was wondering if there's even more, if there's other things as well, but maybe she didn't have time to cover all of the things that libraries have to offer.
Well, I'm an academic librarian, so my whole focus has been access to MiraCosta students and faculty during this pandemic. So we've done a lot of things that are specific to our community, such as 24/7 Zoom and that kind of thing to really, there are, especially public libraries have become centers where people come to get resources. We always joke in the profession that we really need social work degrees, especially in public libraries, because we have a lot of people with food insecurity and housing insecurity and mental illness. So I think libraries, since we're open a lot, seem to be a place that both offer access and understanding. And I think that sometimes when you go to like the DMV or, use an example, but the DMV or, Social Security Administration, it can be a little officious, and libraries and librarians are really focused on serving their communities and providing access and connecting people with resources, not just books or magazines, but whatever resources.
Absolutely.
So I think that's why people come to libraries, is because they're open, the open nature of them. They tend to be less judgmental. So I think that's one of the really great things about libraries. So.
And if I may share one experience on this note, 20 years ago, my family lived in Worcester, Ohio. It's a college town. I taught there. By the way, Dick Robertson graduated from that college, a former vice president. And and I remember, actually, it's a small, just college town almost. And then I remember place to go Friday night was library, and the library was full of people, all generation. Kids are in their section, we are in our section. Everybody pulls out the book, we meet people. So it was a very important place for social gathering, actually. So library has so many influences on people, and I think all my life, the way people go to church, I was going to libraries with that excitement and respect and expecting big things to happen. So generally, really that and always has been a great place.
Well said.
Just one last thing that I wanted to add, actually. This has always been a field that I've been really interested in, and tech adoption rates and libraries are pretty closely tied together. And I often find that libraries access that new technology and those new means of communication well before the rest of the public, because they're a branch of the government that actually keeps its finger on the pulse of the American people, as opposed to some sort of larger bureaucratic organization. So cutting edge technologies like 3D printing, the latest science information, they actually show up at libraries before they really start to disperse into the civilian market. Figured I'd throw my 2 cents in.
Thank you, Sharad.
Yeah. Chris.
Yeah, I was just gonna, we are lucky, and I was saying how lucky we are to have math honors courses. We are one of the few honors programs across the state that has a digital honors research course. And I can speak for Jackie because she said it was her best course ever. But also we have Pamela right here in this room. We are offering for the first time ever a designated honors course in digital library research. And I think if we could have one required course across our curriculum, it would be this course. It's being offered for the first time with Professor Perry as a designated course. Some of the best research projects always come out of this curriculum. So if you're looking for an amazing honors experience next semester, you have the professor right here, Pamela Perry. You have Karis and Jacqueline to vouch for her. I just want to, again, call out some of our amazing faculty that you have an opportunity to work with here in our program. But I can't recommend this course enough. So please consider if you're looking for it. It's Library 201. So yes, we have a very strong academic faculty amongst our library faculty, and they're teaching classes and they're amazing. So if you're looking for a course, there you go.
Thank you. I put it in the chat too. So thank you. Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, I love that course so much. So I encourage anyone to take that. And it works with majors like mine in STEM that you don't have a lot of honors courses to take in that. So it allowed me to do an OMNI presentation on something that related to my major, which was a huge thing. So thank you everyone for sharing in that Q&A. That was wonderful. And thank you, Karis. You did a great presentation. We're going on to our next presentation, which is Garrick Chan with Professor Zika Perovic as the mentor. And your presentation title is Linear Transformations to Map Robot Motion in a Global Coordinate Plane. Rotation matrices and linear transformations are useful to track a robot's motion in a 2D plane. So go ahead and share your screen and tell us all about it. And oh, I'd like to mention that I didn't say this before, please fill out commentary forms for our presenters so they can get feedback. And I will notify you, Garrett, when you are reaching your time limit. So I'll send that to you in the chat, and good luck.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, so my title is Robot Tracking Linear Algebra. Big thanks to my mentor, Dr. Zika Perovic, for his support throughout this entire project. So first we have to understand what's the goal of this system. And so on the left right here, this is actually the playing field. It's a 12 by 12 field with a bunch of obstacles. And it's really useful to know where the robot is at all times so we can tell it to avoid an obstacle or to go around a particular block or to do some sort of motion. And so the question we have is, how do we know where the robot is, given the fact that a robot consists of motors, and as the motors turn, it moves the robot somewhere. And it would be cool to correlate how much the motor turns with where it basically ends up. So we can know, is it at 1, 1? Is it at position 2, 2 on this Cartesian plane? And so that's what we're going to try to answer today. But first, let's understand robot motion basics. And so this robot that we're going to be looking at today uses special mechanism wheels, which allows the robot to go in every single direction. So left, right, forward, backwards, and even diagonal, because it has these special wheels with rollers at 45 degrees. And so the first question we have to answer is the heading of the robot. What's its angle relative to our playing field? And so looking here, let's assume that this square right here is our robot, this being the center of our robot. The robot's own frame, we're going to call this the frame, has its x-axis denoted by xr, its y-axis denoted by yr, and then the playing field has its axes denoted as xg and yg respectively. And so the heading angle we're defining is the angle between the robot's x-axis and the playing field's x-axis. And at this point, you might be wondering, wait, if we're looking for angle, can't we just use a gyrosensor? They're fairly cheap, they're fairly common as well, and used in many applications. And so the answer is yes and no. And the issue with gyro sensors is that the readings can be slow. Since the robot relies on a processor, there's only so many times the readings can update every second. And so what tends to happen is that over time, the gyro sensor accumulates error because it starts missing readings and the robot's actually changed to a new position before the sensor could register that change. And so the gyro sensor is really only good for that first reading where the robot starts. But after that, we need another way to measure the change in angle that's a lot faster and a lot more reliable. Enter the odometry pods. And so looking at this picture on the right, you can see these larger black wheels, which kind of look like the yellow ones in the first slide, are special wheels that are actually powered. However, if you look at these red circles, there's like little mini wheels that are like gray and black. Those are called odometry pods. And basically they're free spinning wheels. They're not powered, but as the robot moves along, there's a little encoder sensor that measures how many times has this free spinning wheel moved. And so basically we have 3 of them mounted here, there, and on the bottom. And basically the encoder sensor that's attached to this free spinning wheel tracks the number of rotations it makes. And the rotations is measured in discrete units called ticks. And so 360 degrees correlates to 1000 ticks. And so we're going to define the change in the ticks of the left odometry pod, this guy right here, to be change of ticks left, and the change of ticks in the right odometry pod to be change of ticks right. And so why are we doing this? What's the beauty here about this system? The answer is, well, change of angle can actually be easily calculated with high accuracy to be change in the left ticks minus change in the right ticks divided by the distance between these odometry pods, L, the lateral distance. And now you might be wondering, why is this true? And so let's just imagine that we had a robot and the left odometry pod registered a displacement of 75 ticks. So it turned 75 ticks. And the right odometry pod turns for 50 ticks. And so using this sort of method, it's pretty clear, it's intuitive that the robot would have made a slight right turn because the left side traveled a greater distance than the right side. And for very small tick values, it can actually be modeled by this arc. So imagine, right, the left side, it goes this distance, the right moves this distance, and the distance between the two, the lateral distance 10 stays constant. And so what can we do from here? We can do a little bit of math, a little bit of manipulation here. And let's imagine this is part of a circle, part of an arc from a circle, and we'll go ahead and extend these lines, these dotted lines right here, so they meet at a point. And so here we can do some mathematical manipulation because we know that the definition of radian angles, going back to trigonometry, is the arc length divided by the radius. So in this case, it's equal to the arc length 75 ticks divided by r, which is the radius, which happens to also be equal to this smaller arc divided by this smaller radius, which would be r minus 10 to just get this little portion right here. And so we can do a little bit of substitution and simplification to get r is equal to change of ticks left divided by change of left minus change of right. And then plugging all that into this original equation gets us this very nice final formula because a lot of things cancel out and we love when things cancels out in math. And so that kind of proves that the change of angle is indeed the differences between the displacement of the two pods divided by the distance between them. Okay, so now we're going to move on to part 2. So we got angle down, now we got to get positioning. And let's start with position in the y direction. And so the change in the y direction is simply the average displacement in the number of ticks in the left and the right odometry pod. And what that basically means is that how far forward did your left side go? How far forward did your right side go? And we have to divide by 2, so we're not double counting the distance. So this one's a little bit more simple. And finally, the change in the x direction. And this is where that third odometry pod that to this point has been left out of the equation, but not anymore. And it's positioned right here on the bottom. And we're going to call the displacement of this particular odometry pod change of ticks horizontal, because if you notice, it's actually mounted differently than the other two. It's mounted parallel. And so it basically tracks, remember this robot can move in any direction, including side to side. So it tracks how far, like horizontally, it's actually moved. But there's one one slight complication, and that is we're trying to find it relative to the center of the robot. So that's why you see this forward offset times change of angle, because if we think about the robot being at an angle, theoretically the distance the back side of the robot traveled could be less than where the center is if it's at an angle. So we kind of account for that little piece. And so finally, let's put everything together. If we define the starting position of this robot to be x0, y0, theta 0, and define the change in position relative to the robot's frame to be change in x, change in y, change in theta, then if we want to find the robot's new position relative to the global frame, we have to use this rotation matrix. And rotation matrix basically says that if the robot started at an angle, we're going to rotate every single point back to 90 degrees. So now we know it relative to the field's coordinate system, basically. So it's a nice little trick to simplify that. And then using some more linear algebra math, doing some augmenting the matrix so that the math checks out, we get this equation, which basically says my new position is my initial position multiplied by the rotational matrix times whatever change the robot made relative to its own frame. And so the final step, we expand the equation and we get this really nice, we're going to call it the master equation of robotics control for the type of robot that we're looking at today. And the beauty about this is that we calculated earlier change of x, change of y, and change of theta in terms of the change in the ticks of those odometry pods, which basically says that we can just take in these values from the sensor, plug it straight into this equation, and now we get the position of the robot at all times, which is super useful because going back to calculus, if we take the derivative of position, we get speed, take the double derivative, you get acceleration. And so we have so much information about the robot. And so finally, let's see it in action. So this robot was actually programmed using sort of the master equation that we showed in the previous slide. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and run it. Picks up a block, place it on the grid. And so as you can see, the robot has a general sense of where everything is, even though there's so many obstacles. And so it's actually able to make real-time adjustments if it misses the target, if it overshoots or undershoots. And so it allows for fairly accurate movement in order to complete mission and park safely under the bridge. And so that is the entire autonomous run. And this robot was moving by itself. We did not control it with any controllers. Ooh. All right, and so that brings me to the end of the presentation. I'm gonna open it up to questions, and I'll just briefly show some of the references that we used. But thank you very much.
Great job, Garrick. That was a really good presentation. You took some really high level math concepts and broke it down really well. So thank you for doing that. And I've seen some of this. I'm taking linear algebra right now. So it was really good to see some real world applications of linear algebra. So I really appreciated that. I just had a question quickly. What inspired you to choose robot motion to demonstrate real world applications of linear transformations?
Yeah, I think my interest in robotics started like 7 years ago when I was on a robotics team, and I still am on a first robotics team. And going through the program, I think one of the struggles, like if there was only a way to know where the position was, instead of just trying to guess, like, okay, maybe it's here one time, it's here another time, and it got very inconsistent. And so with the skills from Dr. Perovich's linear algebra class, I thought that would be a great opportunity to have a more consistent robot and to kind of have a sort of control theory and an equation to explain what was going on in the robot, basically.
That is so cool. And I was on a first robotics team at my high school, and my sister's on one right now. She's mentoring. So what was your team name for first?
We are First Tech Challenge Team 15146 GarageBot.
Oh my gosh, it brings back so many memories from just seeing like the videos of your robot. So very good presentation. And if anyone else has questions for Garrick, We can go to the gallery mode if you want to unshare your screen so you can see if someone raises their hand and has a question for you.
I saw your references at the end there, but how exactly did you go about conducting your research?
So one of the references there, it started with there was actually a Northwestern robotics article talking about some of the some of the uses of control theory in linear algebra, and so that was sort of my starting point to kind of break down the concepts and see which parts I could tackle with the robot.
Garrick, I was not sure. This last video that we saw, is that your robot or you took it from somewhere else?
That's our robot.
Yeah.
That
that's how I felt when we talked about it, but I wanted to double check. Yeah. And as a mentor, I cannot say now how impressed I was with his work, because it was just nice symbiosis that something that he has been doing for years and he's very passionate about, got connected with our course. So that was a very natural symbiosis of those two things, and that shows up. So I was really very glad to just sit on the sidelines and cheerlead. Yeah, it's very nice, very nice.
Yeah, I think this is so cool that you brought in your own robot to have in your presentation. I think that is a great little thing to put on there for you. It's really unique. So great job, Garrick. Does anyone else have any questions? Good to go.
I just want to say well done, very well done. I can't think of any questions because it's so beyond me, but I was so impressed.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll go on to the next presentation then. Great job, Garrick. You did a great job with your personal speaking, with your public speaking as well. So great job.
Thank you.
Okay, our next presenter is Jasmine Mata. Her mentor is Professor Eric sorry, how do I pronounce the professor's name? Can someone butt in for me?
Bergmanis.
Bergmanis.
Yes.
Thank you. And her project is The Impact of Climate Change on Coral Reef Systems, an internet-based study detailing the importance of coral reefs to the health of the oceans and how they are threatened by climate change. So you go ahead and share your screen, Jasmine, and I will let you know when the time is coming to an end. So good luck.
Thank you. Okay, so my presentation today is the impact of climate change on coral reef systems, and I'd like to say thank you to my professor, Eric Bergmanis, for all his help that he did on this. So what are coral reef systems? A coral reef is a large ecosystem that is found underwater and is made up of thousands of small corals, known as polyps and stony corals. Coral reefs have various critical functions, which include shelter for many species, contributions to new medicine, economic benefits, and they also help protect our coastlines. Coral reefs are found in oceans all around the world, more specifically in tropical and semi-tropical waters between 30 degrees south and 30 degrees north latitude. And in this diagram, you can see how most coral reefs are just not too far away from the shore. So coral reefs have various functions. So they are home to thousands of species of fish, so about 25% of all marine fish species. And most of them, well, a lot of them haven't been discovered yet. Coral reefs also contributed to more than 50% of cancer treatment developments that have happened so far, along with other diseases. And they are also very critical not only to our world economy, but to cities that are very close to the shore. They provide thousands of jobs, and they're huge food resources, not for just the marine species that they help protect, but for humans as well. They have a value of about $9.9 trillion, and at least 500 million people depend on coral reefs. So, in order for a coral reef to be healthy, there are a couple requirements. The first one is sunlight. This is because coralline algae needs sunlight in order to provide the reef with the nutrients it needs to thrive, which is why they are mostly found in shallow waters and in water temperatures of 68 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Pollution. Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry, let me switch my slide. So climate change. Climate change is basically the change in average conditions, for example, temperatures and storms and weather and all that stuff. So temperature plays a very big role in the development of coral reefs, and if they are placed in temperatures that are too warm, then this will increase the chances of a coral bleaching event. Coral bleaching is basically when the coral starts to lose its color, and when it starts to lose its color, like the coral begins to die off, and this can basically kill off the whole ecosystem. Pollution is also a major threat to coral reefs because if the water is dirty and murky, then sunlight will not be able to penetrate through, and it won't allow the coral to grow sufficiently. And dumping waste into water can cause an overabundance of nutrients that can overwhelm and kill the reef. Rising sea levels also reduce the amount of sunlight that a reef receives. With climate change, there's stronger and bigger storms, which causes physical damage. And if a reef is physically damaged, it cannot function properly. In this chart here, you can see that from the 1950s to the early 2010s, how much the global ocean temperature has risen. And here you can see how the carbon emissions have also risen since the 1960s. And this first picture is an example of coral bleaching, and you can see how all the corals have lost their color and all the fishes are not there as to the first picture shown in the first slide. And here this is an algal bloom, and basically what happened is that because of an overabundance of nutrients, it overwhelmed the reef. And it also has a lot less fish. Now, an example of a coral reef is the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. It's the largest coral reef in the world, though due to high water temperatures, coral bleaching, and typhoons, over half of the living coral has been lost. In order to save the Great Barrier Reef, we must reduce our carbon dioxide emissions. Now, here are some ideas on how we can help save coral reefs. Driving less, so taking public transportation, walking and riding bikes to short distance locations. Reduce, reuse, recycle, so using reusable containers instead of your everyday plastic sandwich bag, and using refillable water bottles instead of buying the big bulk of plastic water bottles from the grocery store. And I know right now, because of the pandemic, you can't really sign up and go out to do beach cleanups, but that doesn't mean you can't go out on your own and try to pick up as much trash as you can and help keep our beaches clean. You can also help to donate to organizations that help regenerate and protect our coral reefs. And these are my references. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Great job, Jasmine. I think you were very clear throughout the whole thing, and it was very fluid. So you did a great job with your public speaking skills there. And I think you did a great job of getting across how important it is to conserve these reefs. And I mean, I'm from the perspective of like, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Like, I don't visit these coral reefs and I'm not one to travel a lot. So I don't think of it as a big issue or something that I can impact. So I think you did a very good job at explaining of what we can do. So I'll open it up to questions for Jasmine if you have any for her. Does anyone have any questions? Chris Sleeper?
Hey, Jasmine. Great job.
Thanks.
One of the questions I had, and it may be too soon to study, but has the lack of travel caused by COVID-19 ended up reducing some of the pressure on these reefs? And is that maybe something that we can look to, is that maybe we have to have fewer people at the beaches or less travel to some of these areas so that they don't end up having so many reactions? Has there been some research yet on this issue of because of COVID-19, fewer people going to the beaches and impacting them?
So actually, due to a family emergency, I ended up traveling to Mexico, and my family actually lives in Cancun, which is an area that is very has to do a lot with coral reefs. And my grandma's house actually is in front of a very popular area where we have coral reefs. So in that area, you know, you're not allowed to wear sunscreen, you're not allowed to wear mosquito repellent because of the chemicals that they contain. And I went out and there was a lot more fish than usual. So I do think that because of the lack of travel that there's been, that there has been less pressure and less stress on coral reefs.
Thank you. Thank you.
Teresa?
Jasmine, that was a wonderful presentation and I learned so much. And I was wondering, at one point you said that half of living coral reefs has been lost. When I think it was on the slide showing Australia's coral reefs or something. Mm-hmm. But I was wondering, when you say lost, what specifically did you mean? Like it's been bleached because of that?
Yeah. So it's been lost because of coral bleaching. Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I might have missed this, but what exactly was coral bleaching again? Was it like the sun, like it was too intense on them and it caused them to bleach, or was it something to do with tourism?
So coral bleaching basically is when the coral starts to lose their color because of pollution and because of climate change. And when they start losing their color, it basically like they aren't receiving like the right amount of nutrients that they need. So when the coral reef starts to die off, it affects like all the ecosystem, like all the species surrounding it. So then when the coral reef dies off, then like the species, they're not there anymore.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. Teresa.
I know this wasn't the main focus of your research, Jasmine, but when you were researching, did you happen to come across any information about, so when you were talking about how coral reefs can treat cancers and create new drugs and stuff, do you know specifically what part of the coral reef or, you know, is involved in that? Do they like grind up the coral or something?
I don't think they grind up the coral, but I think they what's the word I'm looking for? They extract materials from the coral, and I think they just infuse that with the treatments. I know they also use it for arthritis as well.
I see. Thank you. That makes sense.
Does anyone else have any more questions?
I have one. So I've yet to take a course in oceanic studies, but you explained the information really well and it was very easy to understand. So my question is, what exactly inspired you to move forward with coral reefs as your topic for your research study?
Yeah, so every year I travel to Mexico with my family to visit Mexico that I have there, and we're always swimming out to the reefs. So it's always been like something that I really enjoy to see. And I know that a lot of people, when they do go snorkel, they're just like, oh, look at all these pretty rocks and like, look at all these pretty fish, but they don't really know like the importance of them. So that's why I decided to pick coral reefs.
Well, it was very well done, Jasmine. So thank you for being brave enough to give a live presentation.
Thank you. Oh, I see a question. So coral reefs, they can recover from coral bleaching if stress, like the stress that causes it, is relieved for a long enough period of time.
Oh, so they're not completely like gone. Okay.
Yeah. But if the stress continues to like affect the coral reef, then it just, gets to a point where it's irreversible.
Wow. That's scary, but at least there's still that hope that this can be revived.
Yeah. This project does not relate to my major. I'm actually a finance major. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had the same kind of thing. I did my presentation on fermentation, even though I'm a computer science major. So I'm in the same group with that. Yeah. You did a wonderful job. And you three are the last ones on our OMNI presentation. If anyone, Professor Bergamanis, did you have something to say?
I just wanted to commend Jasmine for the work she did, and it's been, especially trying the last few months for everybody around the world. And I think she did a really good job. And yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's excellent work.
Yes, well done.
You guys all did so good today, and I'm proud of you for doing a live presentation because most students don't either have the time to set aside to do that, or it's just a very nerve-wracking thing. So great job, you guys. And you are the last three of our presentations for our OMNI week. It's a little sad to see it all go, but I think it went very well. And I love how active our Q&As are all the time. And the willingness to learn new things is so strong in this community, and it keeps me going. So I hope it does that for you too. Professor Sleeper, do you have any closing remarks for our OMNI week?
I just want to say thank you to those great mentors like Eric and Pamela and Keith and Shika. We couldn't have an honors program without you, and the time that you make for your students is so valued for me personally, but also for the students in the program. And I want to thank all of the moderators that served this week, like Parisa and Jackie. And I've tried to tell you how many times how just special you are, and that you make this program work and run. And so I am so grateful for that. But also, she's not here now, but if you do have a chance to just thank Elizabeth Lorenana, she was amazing behind the scenes, setting up a lot of our sessions and our program. And she's just been a great asset to our program this whole entire semester. So on behalf of our entire staff, I just want to say thank you to everyone. And we are doing an OMNI again in the spring. And don't forget, we have proposals due in mid-March. And I hope that not only will we learn from each other, but also it'll be a really special time as we're hopefully looking forward to a healthier 2021 and a better world for all of us. So I'm looking forward to the spring OMNI, and I hope you are too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Better New Year.
Well done.
Bye-bye.
Well done. Bye. Bye, Zika.
So Jackie, I have to run to my next Zoom. I have one at 1:30 here. I'm a little bit late, but I just wanted to say thank you again. And thank you, Parisa. And we'll debrief a little bit at another time, but I just wanted to say a little bittersweet here, little kind of moisture in the eyes, just seeing you do your thing. Jackie, just seeing you do your thing, Parisa, just means, so much to me. So Just know that I'm grateful. I'm grateful most of all, and I'll plan on saying some more at another time. But just want to say thank you again for a great Omni. We did it, and again, found out today the Bay Area conference is canceled, and so when other programs and organizations are shutting down their conferences, here we are, you know, successfully showing that it can be done. So the HTCC is still on, the Western Regional is still in limbo, but we're still carrying on as best as we can because we know it's important. So that's all I can really say is that's what we stand for. It's just, it's not the same, but it's still better than what some programs are able to do at this time. So, and that can only be done because of the great people like you. So I just want to say thank you for that from the bottom of my heart, and we'll talk soon. We'll talk soon. I'll reach out again in the days to come. But gotta run and do another Zoom here, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye, Professor Sleeper. Bye,
Okay.
Carissa.